morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'd like to let you know that we'll be starting in about 2 minutes. So let's get comfortable and get ready to dive into the conversations for today. Once again, a very, very good morning to each and every one of you. Thank you so much for joining us on today's special session. Today's the United Nations Day for South-South Cooperation, and we're really excited to have this crucial conversation today because mobilizing multi-stakeholder partnerships to unlock the potential of South-South and triangular cooperation is a really relevant and crucial conversation to have. My name is Fiona Mothoni Naringwa. I am a media personality and I'll be the host for today's very important session. We all know that with the right support, including financial and technical mobilization, real and high impact change can be achieved within the Global South communities and lead to the attainment of global development agendas, looking at the AU Agenda 2063, looking at achieving also the Sustainable Development Goals. So to really get us started on today, I'd like you to help me welcome. We have with us Ambassador Christine Ngurichinga, the CEO of Rwanda Corporation, to really get us into why we are here today. A round of applause as she comes to the stage.
Honorable Minister of State in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, in charge of East African Community, Excellencies, Ambassadors and High Commissioners, UN Resident Coordinator, representatives of international organizations, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. It is an honor to welcome you today as we celebrate the UN Day for South-South Cooperation here at the Rwanda Cooperation Governance Center. I particularly welcome the guests and partners who traveled from afar to be with us today. This is the second year we are celebrating the UN Day for South-South Cooperation. Our first meeting last year was filled with hopeful, inspirational, and humbling dialogues. This year, we are gathering at a time when our goals for an equitable, prosperous, and peaceful world seem under the greatest threat. 47% of the world lives on less than $7 a day. Hunger is worsening worldwide, with over 800 million people regularly going to bed hungry, and that is about 10% of the global population. Approximately half of the world's population lacks access to essential health services. Further to these, 11 million people are still pushed to extreme poverty because of health or medical expenses. On education, primary school enrollment, which has generally been on the rise since 1997, is now declining. Some good news: access to safely managed water, sanitation, and hygiene is on the rise. The bad news, though, is that it has declined on our continent, Africa. On digitization, the cost of internet has been on the decline, but the digital divide worsens as the poorest of the global population remain unconnected and not digitally literate, whereby, sadly, women represent the largest part. The facts I've just mentioned only account for 6 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I did not even touch on the climate change, even though its devastating impacts are hard to ignore today. But that would need a dedicated gathering of us here again at Rwanda Cooperation Governance Center. There are some nations faring better than others. There have been growth and development. The challenge we face is that growth and development have not been uniform, further intensified by the current economic downturn the whole globe is going through. This is why this day is important to recognize the value and impact of collaboration, in working together to overcome these challenges and put us within reach of achieving the SDGs. It is a foregone dream, but I refuse to give up, and so do all of you in this room today, and many others who are not with us from across the globe. In our quest to ways to improve the quality of life of our people, South-South cooperation is increasingly becoming an important source of solutions to common development challenges. Allow me to quote a passage from the message of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres for this year's UN Day for South-South Cooperation, and I quote, "Only together can we build a world of shared prosperity where cooperation knows no borders. Through South-South cooperation, countries of the Global South can share knowledge, skills, expertise, and resources, coordinate their efforts, and benefit from economies of scale. Together, they can multiply their sustainable development efforts to mitigate climate disruption, find solutions to a global health crisis, manage supply chain disruption, and deliver humanitarian assistance." End of quote. Rwanda Cooperation is committed to continue championing South-South and triangular cooperation by facilitating the fostering of global partnerships and providing a platform for Global South countries to learn and benchmark on each other's successful approaches in addressing the challenges faced. We are determined to promote knowledge exchange and mutual growth in our work by collaborating with government agencies, development partners, civil society organizations, and with the private sector. We continue to advocate for and share innovative development initiatives through South-South and triangular cooperation. I encourage you all gathered here today to take this opportunity to contribute to constructive dialogues, create meaningful connections, and shape agendas that will truly accelerate collaboration, that will mitigate the challenges the globe is facing. I look forward to hearing from you and connecting with you today and in the future. Thank you once again for joining us, and let us continue the discussions in the spirit of collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for the strong words spoken as well as a call to action. As she said, only together can we build a world of prosperity. We're now going to turn our attention to the screens. We're going to watch video remarks. We're going to watch video remarks by Dima Al-Khatib, Director of the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I am honored to join you today, albeit virtually, for the commemoration of the United Nations Day for South-South Cooperation. This is an opportunity to celebrate and reaffirm our commitment to solidarity, equity, and partnership among countries in unlocking the potential of South-South cooperation for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. This year's theme, solidarity, equity, and partnerships, unlocking South-South cooperation to achieve the SDGs, is also an opportunity to reflect on the historic milestone that took place on September 12, 1978, in Buenos Aires, Argentina, whereby delegations from 138 states adopted a plan of action for promoting and implementing technical cooperation among developing countries. This marked the beginning of a journey towards stronger collaboration among nations in the Global South. Today, as we weather the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, conflicts, climate change, and other crises, South-South cooperation has proven to be even more critical for developing countries. The multiplicity and complexity of the challenges we face have rolled back years of development progress. In times like these, multilateralism, solidarity, and cooperation are very much needed to overcome barriers and build back better. In recent years, the United Nations Development Systems has recognized the immense potential of South-South cooperation. The call for the UN system to support national partners by leveraging this cooperation modality has been expressed and reflected in multiple international forums and guiding documents, such as the Buenos Aires Plan of Action Plus 40, what we call the BAPA Plus 40, the decisions from the 21st High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation, the United Nations General Assembly Second Committee, among others. With its mandate to promote and facilitate South-South and Triangle cooperation globally and within the UN system, the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation has played a pivotal role in developing a United Nations system-wide strategy and action plan on South-South cooperation and Triangle cooperation for sustainable development, aiming to mainstream South-South and Triangle cooperation into the work of the United Nations Development System at the country and regional levels. As we increasingly witness the tangible impact achieved through South-South and Triangle cooperation, through various collaborative efforts between governments and the UN system at the country level, UNOSSC has established a digital knowledge sharing platform called the Galaxy, offering a wide range of more than 900 vetted South-South and Triangle cooperation solutions. I encourage you to explore and make good use of this platform, as well as share your own solutions for wider circulation and wider sharing of experience. Colleagues, your dedication to South-South cooperation serves as an inspiration to us all. As you keep pursuing this journey of harnessing the power of South-South and Triangle cooperation to address development challenges, we at UNOSSC stand ready to support you. Together, let us rise above the obstacles and work hand in hand towards a more prosperous and sustainable future. I thank you.
A round of applause. We're now going to get remarks from Mr. David Katrud, Director of the Programs and Humanitarian Division at the World Food Programme, on behalf of the RBAs. A round of applause as he takes the podium.
Fiona. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed, good morning to all. I'm particularly delighted to stand before you here this morning representing the Rome-based agencies in this celebration of the UN Day for South-South Cooperation. This would not have been possible without the generous support from the Rwanda Cooperation Initiative, for which we're most grateful. We also note that they're celebrating, in addition to our celebration, their 15th anniversary, a great accomplishment that we all acknowledge. Along with my fellow directors from the RBAs, FAO, IFAD, and I'm, of course, from WFP, and they're present here in the room, we're so pleased that we have this opportunity for this joint celebration to take place here in Rwanda as a testament to the importance of this great work that has been carried out on the ground here in this country, where it indeed matters most. It is fitting that we gather here today in Kigali as the government of Rwanda, with the support of the UN, has developed a world-class homegrown school feeding program. In this regard, I am pleased that we are joined today by His Excellency Dr. Vincent Biruta, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Let me begin by stressing that the RBAs, the Rome-based agencies, that's the acronym we use, are fully committed to stepping up our joint efforts in the area of South-South and triangular cooperation, as we acknowledge that the increasing demand for support from member states in this regard, on one hand, we have that, and on the other hand, we have a wealth of solutions in the Global South that we want to fully exploit. The potential of the South-South mechanism, as we all agree, can facilitate real progress, and we've heard that already today, in achieving the 2030 agenda. And I share the optimism we've already heard in achieving the 2030 agenda. As we've already also heard, this is more relevant than ever, as the world faces possibly the most extensive food and nutrition crisis in recent times. The outlook for 2023 remains alarming, with a crisis spanning all regions, affecting both rural and urban population, and resulting in concerning levels of food insecurity and malnutrition. In an effort to address these challenges, the RBAs have stepped up our coordination in working to fully leverage South-South and triangular cooperation. It is our view that this will help us develop innovative solutions, fully realize and multiply the impact of our individual agencies' comparative advantage, and ultimately realize synergies in our collective efforts. Experience from the field has shown us that where we have strong in-country collaboration amongst our agencies aligned with the UN, we can in fact deliver on the SDG 2, ending hunger, and that effort becomes more effective and more impactful. The focus so far of our efforts has admittedly been a bit at the global level, and today's event is certainly part of that international advocacy effort. However, in convening here now in Rwanda with this event, we have the opportunity to intensify collaboration at the field level. And that's what we want to take forward, and that's where it matters most to the vulnerable populations that we serve. In this vein, the RBAs have initiated homegrown school feeding pilot projects in 4 countries: Kenya, the Philippines, Senegal, and right here in Rwanda. This initiative aims to strengthen the capacities of these countries to design and implement national homegrown school feeding programs facilitated by South-South and triangular cooperation, and that is well aligned with the efforts of the outcomes of the UN Food Systems Summit and the recent stock-taking moment that we all had in Rome not so long ago, the efforts of the Global School Meals Coalition, and the 2018 joint RBA roadmap that works towards the BAPA plus 40 that you just heard referenced in the remarks. We view homegrown school feeding as a key entry point to deliver the systematic transformation that is required to make food systems work for all. Moreover, this RBA joint SSTC program represents a concrete way to operationalize each agency's commitment and respond to the growing country demand for enhanced support in South-South and triangular cooperation, while also contributing to the implementation of this broader UN South-South collaboration strategy that was referenced earlier. Stakeholders represented today, both in the room and, of course, online, represent a community that can play an important role in supporting our efforts, our RBA efforts. And over the course of the next couple of days, as the 3 directors are here in country, we hope to hear and learn more about good practices and innovations, both at the policy and at the programmatic levels. This will help us take the model to scale and fill critical implementation gaps with a growing set of participating countries, not only Rwanda, but also throughout the Global South. So, in conclusion, on behalf of my fellow directors at FAO and IFAD, we look forward to working with all of you in the course of the next few days and well beyond. With that, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. David, for your remarks and also highlighting the crucial program that it's currently working on. You've touched on the importance of collaboration at the field level where it matters most, strengthening capacity, also implementing the larger SSC agenda. We're now going to turn our attention to the screens. Once again, we're going to have another video remark from Dr. Geraldine Mukeshimana. She is the IFAD Vice President promoting South-South and Triangular Cooperation for Food System Transformation and Poverty Alleviation.
Good morning and welcome to the 2023 UN Day for South-South Cooperation. I am pleased to speak to you on the theme that is close to the hearts of all of us working in development, promoting South-South and triangular cooperation for food system transformation and poverty alleviation. Solidarity, equity, and partnerships are essential elements of SSTC. They can help us achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and other global commitments. This year's report on the state of food security and nutrition highlights that compared to 2019, 120 million more people are facing hunger. COVID-19, the increasing impacts of climate change and conflicts have been among the factors driving this increase. SSTC emerged as an important tool to address the challenges that we are facing. Here in the East African region, we have seen how collaboration has led to positive impacts in the most vulnerable communities. The Rome-based agencies of the United Nations, FAO, IFAD, and WFP, play a pivotal role in this regard. For instance, in Kayonza district of Rwanda, IFAD is partnering with the Dutch organization promoting linkages between the Rwandan and Chinese private sector and farming groups. The project trains young people on how to maintain agricultural equipment and become skilled mechanics. This allows them to assure a regular income for themselves. They are also able to support other local farmers with machine maintenance. Across the border in Uganda, FAO has facilitated the partnership with China to support rice, milk, and fish value chains. The partnership has helped some communities achieve a 4-fold increase in their production. This means better fed households and higher incomes. Just last month, WFP facilitated the learning visit for delegates from Malawi and Nigeria to the Kenya Social Protection Program. The engagement with local beneficiaries and the on-ground interaction provided invaluable insights. Now, these delegates aren't just returning home with memories and photographs. They are armed with actionable knowledge and the capacity to transfer it to their own context. These initiatives are a clear reflection on the transformative power of solidarity and partnerships for the global development. They show why we need to encourage more partners from South as well as the North, to come on board with SSTC. As you gather in Kigali, I invite each of you to take advantage of this wonderful opportunity to exchange ideas, experiences, and aspirations. Together, you can help increase the impact of South-South and triangular cooperation in the lives of the people we serve. Thank you.
We're now going to hear remarks from Mr. Ozonia Ojielo, the United Nations Resident Coordinator. A round of applause as he makes his way to the stage.
Almost. Thank you very much, Fiona. Ambassador Christine Kulinyinka, CEO of Rwanda Corporation. Honorable Minister of State for International Cooperation, Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Professor Manasseh, Excellencies, Ambassadors, High Commissioners, distinguished partners from various parts of Rwanda, different institutions. Please permit me to particularly acknowledge the presence of my colleagues who have come from the Rome-based agencies. You already met David Catrud, spoke earlier, the Director for Program Humanitarian Development Division in WFP. Mr. Ron Hartman, IFA Director for Global Engagement Partnerships and Resource Mobilization. Ron, thank you. And then, of course, Amping Ye, who is FAO Director, South-South and Triangular Cooperation with the various delegations and regional directors, as well as my colleague heads of agencies who are here in the House and the parts of the United Nations system, our dear friends in the development community, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Perhaps I would like to start by congratulating our dear sister, Geraldine Mukeshimana, for her election, appointment as IFAD Vice President. I think it's a recognition of the transformation that is happening in Rwanda, and therefore Rwanda's determination to share those ideas on a wider canvas. But in particular, when she was Minister for Agriculture, she challenged me vigorously on many things the UN was doing on agriculture, school feeding, agricultural transformation, economic opportunities for young people using entrepreneurship. And I could see the vision for how to do things differently, given the multiple issues that Ambassador you have highlighted about the global challenges that we face today. So it leaves me very hopeful that those ideas are in the right place now in Rome, working with all the Rome-based agencies to try and create the transformations that are necessary for us to recover the SDGs, as you very rightly said. And I think it's important, as previous speakers have said, the recognition that South-South cooperation is a manifestation of solidarity among peoples and countries of the global South. And the logic is to contribute to national well-being and societal transformation, building on national and collective self-reliance, but also the attainment of the SDGs. Because if you transform your economy and your society using those global principles, you will by default realize the SDGs. So the SDGs are a vehicle, but the destination of travel is the socio-economic transformation of our societies. And so I want to appreciate the leadership of you, Ambassador, but also my colleagues from the Rome-based agencies in coming together to co-organize this. And it is a reflection also of the direction of travel of the United Nations system, that siloed approaches by agencies no longer work. The logic of the reform of the UN development system is coherence, is integration, is complementarity by the entire United Nations system, so we deliver together for the government and the people of the society. And I think it is important that I acknowledge the fact that the three directors are here together, because in the past, it would have been each director coming on their own, visiting the programs to the various agencies, writing a report to their leadership, and building on those programs to implement. But here they come together, so there's a common accountability that the three agencies are undertaking, that there are many routes to the journey, but there's a convergence point. The sweet spot that unites what each agency brings is what they will highlight and build on that integration, that coherence, that complementarity. at the end of the day, what it helps us achieve is to strengthen the collective and strategic offer of the United Nations system in Rwanda to the government and the people of the country. So this theme couldn't be more relevant about solidarity, equity, and partnership to unlock South-South cooperation to achieve the SDGs. And Ambassador Nkulukinya has mentioned this, why it's essential that we do this. And why it's important also is because we do recognize that globally, there is no template, there is no pathway to national development, that the socio-economic transformation of a country is actually a conjecture that is realized from their social, historical, political experiences, their lived experiences. So each country will be different. But in our case, given the histories of the global south, particularly with colonialism and the post-colonial experience, that there are comparative experiences that we can build. And on the basis of these experiences, particularly the manifestations of colonialism, there may be something that we can learn from each other. So the idea of reciprocal knowledge sharing, technical assistance, platforms for policy dialogue, building capacity are part of the vehicles for driving sustainable development and responding to the challenges that the CEO of Rwanda Corporation has mentioned. Now, let us not for one moment assume that this thing began in 1978 because the UN passed a General Assembly resolution. It is an imperative reality, and it has been with us. Long before our modern governments began adapting and using the concept, the practice existed for decades, if not centuries. For those of us who are students of history, many of us are familiar with the visit of Sultan Mansa Musa of the Old Mali Empire in 1324 when he paid a pilgrimage to Mecca. And on his return journey, he stopped off in Egypt and took with him scores of Islamic scholars, writers, and scientists to share knowledge. So the historicity of knowledge sharing and experience and building on those is centuries old. But most importantly, it was recorded in history that his generosity was so boundless that he distributed quantities of gold and other precious metals along the journeys that he traveled, and so impacted the economies of the local societies on his route. Do we forget the history of the post-colonial struggle and independence of Africa, which cannot be complete without the writings and activism of the Afro-Caribbean scholars who dedicated themselves to the liberation of Africa? Many of them had never even visited Africa. Many had just an understanding. And yet that spirit, that oneness, that transgeographic, transatlantic cooperation and transformation can only happen when we pool capacities and resources, was the driving factor that led them to the kinds of engagements they engaged in promoting African political independence. And between 1900 and 1945, there were 6 Pan-African congresses that met to discuss how African countries can end colonialism and take control of their political futures. And you look at what has then happened, the liberation struggle that took place in Africa, the political independence movement, most of them were derived from these Pan-African congresses, particularly the one in 1945 in Manchester, which was also the philosophical underpinning for the formation of the Organization of African Unity in 1963. And why was the OAU formed? The OAU was formed essentially on the principle of South-South cooperation, that there are new learnings, new approaches. As countries become independent, those that have gained independence or have expertise must deploy to help them to gain independence. And so it's not surprising that on 5th March 1957, as Ghana was celebrating its own independence, Kwame Nkrumah declared that the independence of Ghana would be meaningless without the full liberation of the rest of the African continent. And so he dedicated his efforts and the resources of his country to supporting the independence movement as well as the liberation movements across the continent. So did Nigeria, which committed so much resources to the liberation of Southern Africa that Nigeria was declared a frontline country for Southern Africa, even though geographically it is located in West Africa. So did many of our countries here pay a huge price in hosting liberation fighters, independence movements in our countries, as they offered scholarships to many of them from Senegal to Algeria to you name it, that in Uganda, Zambia, all the frontline states. And the logic was that we are in it together. We need to invest in each other to ensure that transformation. What it does then say to us is that South-South cooperation, looking from the historicity of where it has come from to where we are today, and we talk about the SDGs today, and the importance of using the SDGs as a rallying point and vehicle for South-South cooperation, that it offers us a pathway for more inclusivity to empower countries, communities, but also various actors from the global South, so that the logic is the transformation of our societies. And if we transform our societies, we can then help hopefully realize the SDGs. So in today's context, the SDGs have become a universal call to action to end poverty, to protect the planet, and to ensure that we enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. And the only way we can do this is through solidarity and cooperation by member states, which is why the UN Secretary General talked about in his statement for this year that we can only build a world of shared prosperity where cooperation knows no borders, and that countries of the global South can share knowledge, skills, expertise, resources, but also coordinate our efforts and to benefit from economies of scale. And the research evidence is obvious from the World Bank, IMF, all the global research associations, that the countries of the global South are contributing more now. They have become the primary drivers of global growth, contributing to more than what they did in previous years. And this is an inevitable direction of travel. So if the countries of the global South are now contributing more as drivers of growth, then it behoves on us to try to understand what some of them are doing very well and how we can build on this. So in the concluding part of my statement then, I thought perhaps I should just highlight then a few obvious points, but which remain to us as the entry points for how we then can consolidate and build on South-South cooperation. The number one, of course, is regional integration, that no country can do it alone. And this is beneficial for addressing regional challenges, but also addressing common development goals. So whether from the peace and security pillar, the countries from the region are those who feel it the most and are impacted, that we know that since 2014, the United Nations Security Council has not authorized any peacekeeping mission. So if you want peace in your neighborhood, you better get organized by countries in the region. So whether it's in East Africa, or in Southern Africa, or in West Africa, or Central Africa, the countries of the region are taking the ownership and saying we will try to protect peace in our societies, we will invest in each other's societies to make sure that we address terrorism, we address instability, we address insecurity. And on the economic front, the logic of the African Continental Free Trade Area is that 2.4 billion market, representing the biggest trade platform in the world. And if we can unlock and build on the policies and the exchange, if we can leverage the expertise that exists, the capacities through the free movement protocol that we have in our various regions, that it can make a world of difference. Each of the regional blocks now, whether it's Vision 2050 for EAC or ECOWAS Vision 2030, each of them has protocols on energy, on infrastructure, road construction, bridges, electricity, to link up so that we can build on each other's capacities and transform our region. And that travel is being made easier. So I like to celebrate Rwanda, Mauritius, Seychelles, Benin, and Gambia as the only countries in Africa that actually allow visa-free arrival. You can pick your visa at the airport if you're an African. But as we speak now, 48 countries in Africa at least grant visa-free arrival to at least one nationals of one country. Now the challenge is that we have an AU passport. If you have an AU passport, why then should you be asking for a visa? Everybody knows Dangote, the Nigerian businessman, the richest man in Africa. He was one of those that was given the AU passport, and he flew into a country in his private jet, and they had to stamp a visa on his AU passport. It defeats the logic of the cooperation. When you have an AU passport, it means you can enter. You're an African citizen. So that's a journey we need to travel together as Africa in expanding these opportunities. So we don't always have to look to Asia or South and Central America as our touchstones for reference, but within Africa, there's a lot happening. Is it in innovation and adaptation, learning from the experiences of other countries, how they've addressed issues from disasters, but also on how to transform their societies? Every country you go to now have innovation labs, different countries empowering young people. So we're learning. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. The biggest issue, of course, is in the whole issue of financing development, that many countries in our region face resource constraints. Let's not get into the history. The history is very long about why our economies are where they are. Both exogenous but also endogenous factors are responsible. But through South-South cooperation, we can create an avenue that allows us to address these issues. Take a classic example. Each of our countries has pension funds, and there's massive amounts of money in the pension funds. But in the desire to protect the security of the pension funds, governments have enacted legislation that limit the use of the pension funds. And there we are, speaking to countries of the global north, talking about giving us money to finance our development. If you can unlock your pension funds, and not just in your own country, but use the same pension funds to invest across borders, we can significantly create a new platform for resources that we use to transform our countries. And the biggest debate on the horizon today, which is now animating discourses, is the reform of the international financial architecture. The international financial architecture was constructed in 1945 to respond to the reconstruction of Europe after the Second World War. The only free countries in Africa at that time were Liberia and Ethiopia. And I think Ethiopia was recovering from the Italian invasion. So I'm not even sure whether Liberia was present. And even if they were, they had no voices. So the financial architecture we are dealing with today was made for a different era and a different period. And when the UN Secretary General says we need to unbundle and rebundle the international financial architecture, it is so that it can speak to the needs of a greater majority of us, to address the problems that Ambassador Christian has mentioned. The SDGs cannot be achieved without the financing. So what Africa is asking for, what the Global South is asking for, is not charity. It's about global solidarity, because we're in this together, we're all impacted. And so while some might feel they're going to lose power, the voting power they have, the power to appoint the leadership of the international financial institutions, if we don't unbundle the international financial architecture and make it relevant to the needs of the Global South, it means that the problems that the South have will continue to be exported to the North, and that will create more challenges for each and every one of us. And the Secretary General has outlined a number of areas where this reform could take place. Another critical example that you will find fascinating is in the cost of credit. Western private sector institutions come to Africa and they make between 5 to 25% profit on investments in Africa. If Africa was so lucrative for profit, then why is credit so expensive? Because a lot of the issues is about mindset. It's about mindset that a dependency and inability to manage your resources to deal with macroeconomic issues persists, and therefore we are not sure that our money is safe in your hands, and you bump up the cost of credit. So governments are spending all of their times paying up the interest before you talk about the principal on the loans. So this new agenda of South-South cooperation is where we need to come together to find new solutions, but create the solidarity to address all of these issues. And then, of course, issues around knowledge sharing and technical assistance, the policy dialogue, and engaging with stakeholders. So in conclusion, this celebration for us highlights Rwanda's commitment to South-South cooperation, but also the shining example of progress that Rwanda continues to showcase through Rwanda cooperation. That hundreds of people are coming from across not just Africa, but the Global South. A couple of months ago, they came from the Caribbean countries to come and understudy what is happening here. So this coming together can only strengthen our collective efforts to make a tangible impact in the lives of our people, but in particular for those of us here, in the lives of the people of Rwanda. So from the UN country team in Rwanda, we thank you, my dear sister Christine, for this collaboration. We thank all of those who are present, but I had to make all of these points because we have ambassadors and high commissioners present who continue to advise their countries, we have policymakers present. Africa needs a different dialogue. We need a different conversation. South-South cooperation will be meaningless if we don't have a new degree of partnership. It's a partnership of solidarity where we all unclench our fists and have a new handshake that is meaningful for the global transformation that we need to see. Murakoze Chairman.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ojielo. Very passionately spoken. We'll actually be touching on some of the key points you have raised during the first panel session for today. You've also taken us really back to history and showed us what really matters and what really lies at the heart of achieving everything that we're discussing here today, knowledge sharing and cooperation. All these which are also within today's theme. We're now going to receive our keynote address. Help me welcome Professor Nshuti Manasseh, Minister of State in charge of East African Community. A round of applause as he walks to the stage.
Ambassador Christine, Excellencies, Ambassadors and High Commissioners, my brother UN Resident Rep, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm happy to join you today to celebrate 2023 UN International Day for South-South Cooperation, hosted by Rwanda Cooperation Agency, an institution put in place to ensure that this work is done the best way it should. And the theme of this event is Solidarity, Equity, Partnership, Unlocking South-to-South Cooperation to achieve SDGs. Excellencies, from Rwanda's perspective and experiences, I will share a few of what we have done. There are no miracles in what we do in this country, except that we try to do what we do because we believe it's the right thing to do, and we do it for our people. We do it for Rwandese. And believe that what we do in this country can be done elsewhere. There are no miracles that we have at all. I can tell you this is my fourth ministry, and I think the difference that we try to do here is that we do it with passion, and we know there is a human face behind what we do. And all of us in the government, we put a human face in whatever we do, so that implementation is done to the last. And I think this is what we could share with the South-to-South cooperation. Of course, I applaud the UN agencies who are present here and the work that you do. But I can tell you, for my 23 years in the government, we have a date. We have a date. Maybe they don't tell you, but we have a date. A date that I don't know how long we're going to pay it, but our people are asking us how much can we talk and how much should we do. I think there's a difference between what we do, we say, and what we do. And the people tell us almost every day what we say and what we do, there's huge variance. And of course that variance can only be filled or answered by us in this room and outside this room. And so, as we celebrate this cooperation, we need to take stock and see how much have we come or done and how much can we do. Because, as I mentioned shortly, there is somebody behind what we do here or what we say here. There's somebody who should benefit, and for God's sake, nobody should lose by virtue of us meeting and speaking on their behalf. And this is even more pertinent because most of our countries have a history that's not very good for different reasons I'm not going to go into right now. But we cannot be held hostage by history. I think we need to sit down and see what can we do better through the South-South cooperation, and we can if we are determined to do that. Rwanda has decided to nurture this South-South cooperation because we believe it has lessons to pass on to different countries, because we share common variables, we share common problems, and we believe we can solve these problems if we work together. I think, as UN Resident Rep has said, cooperation is the way out. It's not just being scattered and think that we can go it alone. That's not an answer to our problems in development. And so, in Rwanda, and especially the government of Rwanda, have put more effort in this South-South cooperation, because we believe that we can learn very little from those that have gone very far, but can learn a lot among ourselves. As I said, we share common problems, share common constraints, and we share common future, a future that we should make better than what has been. And of course, in this room, we have a duty to make it happen. I'm not dwelling so much. My brother has mentioned everything I was supposed to. I won't repeat myself. But I want to really congratulate you, RCA, for organizing this meeting. But I think it's not a talking shop, for God's sake. No. As I said, when you have a people behind us, we need to talk to make sure that what we talk can be implemented. And I think this is where there's a difference between what we can do as a government and what you can do as institutions, the UN and other agencies. I think the failure is in implementation, I can tell you. It's in implementation. Have good policies, good statements, good programs, but if you look at our implementation, it's between 10 and 30%. The problem is we don't take stock with that implementation. We just pass it off, but there are people that fail beyond that implementation. For all of us, government, UN agencies, very good statements. Sometimes put in the sweeteners you can name, but the implementation is always our failure. So, as I think we meet this morning, we need to be looking at how much have implemented vis-a-vis how much we should have implemented. And this South-South cooperation will also judge us in how much that can be done. So thank you very much for this morning and your attendance. But as I said, let us see how much you can implement more than how much you can stock. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your remarks. Indeed, implementation, that is going to be also another key area that we'll be touching on during the first panel discussion. We are going to dive into our first panel. I think as they get ready, let's give all our speakers for this morning another round of applause. They have all highlighted the crucial aspects on why mobilizing multi-stakeholder partnership to unlock the potential of SSC is important. And we've seen with the right support really, and when we talk about support, we're looking at financial as well as technical mobilization. This could lead to real and high impact change that also can lead to the attainment of global development agendas such as the Sustainable Development Goals as well as the Africa Union's Agenda 2063. Our panelists for this discussion once again, I'll start by welcoming Mr. Ozonia Ojielo. Welcome. You may take the seat on the extreme left. He's the United Nations Resident Coordinator. We also have Mr. Ronald Hartman, Director for Global Engagement, Partnership and Resource Mobilization at IFAD. With us, we also have Ambassador Christine Ngurichinga, the CEO of Rwanda Corporation. A round of applause for our panelists. I think, Ambassador, I'll start with you. Not to put you on the spot, but a lot has been said this morning from all our speakers. Just start by telling us, give us an in-depth look. What has been achieved when you look at the conversations that we're having today? What really needs to be done? How crucial is the conversation today? What are the urgent actions that are needed?
Thank you very much, moderator. As mentioned by the previous speakers and by my brother specifically, there is a lot that has been already achieved. But as mentioned by the minister, it's only 10 to 30%. So I think there is a lot we can still do. I think we all know what we have to do. It's a question of implementing now. How do we make sure that we implement it, that we learn from each other? I think this is also the most important part, that we don't reinvent the wheel every time, but that we learn from other countries and from each other. So I think implementation is key, is something we really, and I hope in the course of the discussions here today, we will be really practical and really talking about how we can implement it.
Yeah. As you said in your remarks earlier on, this is the second year Rwanda Corporation is celebrating UN Day for SSC. First of all, thank you for bringing us all here together to celebrate and have this crucial conversation. But what challenges have you faced, especially when pulling together technical, financial resources to support the acceleration and implementation of everything that you're doing?
Rwanda Corporation has been created in 2018, so we have an experience of 5 years now. It has been 5 very interesting and yes, at times challenging as for a new institution. But we pulling together technical and financial resources is of course, it has already been mentioned. It's difficult, but it's crucial. So it has to be done. And when we talk about source of cooperation and triangular cooperation, it means that there are several parties involved. And of course, the more parties you have, the more partners you have, the more challenges you meet. So there is a range of challenges we have also experienced as Rwanda Corporation, but also that we know that they exist in this kind of setting. But I will just name a few. For example, okay, the funding and resource allocation, that you might find different priorities when you work with different partners, so to align the priorities and to agree on what we do. Capacity and expertise, of course, on both sides of the different partners. You don't always find the needed capacity and expertise for the specific project or collaboration. Bureaucracy and administrative hurdles. I think we, as Rwanda Corporation, have already experienced that working with different partners that it might take really long. Some will immediately tell you, we are very slow, so please bear with us. But others, you will learn it on the way. So it's also something you have to struggle with. And as you know, here in Rwanda, we work on target, we have Imihigo. So when you work with someone who is going slow, so you find yourself really getting under pressure to achieve what you want to do. So those are some of the challenges. There is more monitoring and evaluation. How do you make sure that what you do together is monitored, is evaluated, and most importantly, sustainable? And where, as Minister was saying, not only doing, but really evaluate did we reach 10%, 50%, or in the best case, more than 80%. So these kind of mechanisms are also lacking or not done the same way. Another important one is risk and change management. So when you bring a new program, a new project, there is some changes that you need to manage, which is not always easy. You will meet resistance. I think it's something is known. Every change meets some resistance. So this can also be challenging, particularly if you want to move fast, as I said, and others are not really following. So it can also be challenging. So just a few, but most importantly is also a question of intellectual property and intellectual rights. When you do projects together, to make sure that you take care also of that part, being you implementing, but also the receiving or the partner countries. How do you ensure that the rights of intellectual property are safeguarded? So just a few, but I think what is important in that case, I don't mean to say that it's difficult, it's not doable, it is doable. The most important is to be flexible, to maintain the dialogue and the conversation, to make sure that you have the same vision and the same objectives, and then you work along the line. Thank you.
Quite a number of hurdles you've touched on. And I'm aware that in the audience we do have our partners. Maybe we can also get to hear from the audience later on. If you have any question, if you also have any challenge that you face in particular, just feel free, jot it down. Towards the end of the conversation, we'll also have time to get to hear from the audience. Mr. Ojielo, coming to you. The United Nations for SST has really showed us, even from your remarks and from the remarks of all our other speakers, that it's a powerful reminder that when nations unite, they can really overcome obstacles and accelerate a sustainable development. So what role do you envision as the United Nations playing in promoting collaboration in achieving this sustainable development?
Thank you, Fiona. Perhaps I would take the question in two dimensions. First, Rwanda, and second, the global context, and I'll try and be brief on both of them. So, yes, lawyers are not known to be brief, right? In Rwanda, I think my dear brother, Professor Shuti, has mentioned the fact about impact and results. That's fundamental. So we are in that introspection as a United Nations system in Rwanda, and saying to ourselves, yes, the problems may be multiple, but the canvas of development actors is also multiple. So how does UN, as one of the development actors, complement the work of others? And so when you look at the national diagnostic of what the issues are, what is the UN's comparative advantage? And to focus on the comparative advantage, but also to determine that based on what we see as a persistent, is it okay? Okay. Thank you. What we see as a persistent and protracted development challenges that UN's comparative advantage can help contribute to, and not get involved in a salad of multiple things. So you narrow the focus, but you dig deeper. And then you build the quality partnerships with other development actors that complement what they do, but also with private sector and other institutions. Number two is that UN actually is more like a space. It's a convening space, it's a brokering space, and should not be fully in implementation. You can get involved in implementation as proof of concept, as prototyping, to show it can work. But implementation is national actors, the civil societies, community groups. So keep the UN at the strategic level and create the space for kinds of conversations that lead to consensus seeking on how to address these persistent and protracted problems, and leverage the expertise from different parts of the world that can make it present. Ambassador of China is here. China elevated more than 500 million people out of poverty in a generation. No country on earth has done something like that. So why are we not learning those kinds of lessons and sharing them? And so the UN's, then defining the UN strategic offer is then based on our comparative advantage, the persistent and protracted challenges, and what we bring to the table in complement to all the other actors. And the conversation then must never be about the money. Because number one, UN is not a donor. Number two, in the spirit of Paris Agenda on Aid Effectiveness, Addis Ababa Action Agenda, the money should be going to the national systems. Once national capacity continues to increase, most of the resources should go in that particular direction. So the UN's role can no longer then be on projects implemented by the UN for which it has money. The UN's role has to be on brokering the conversations around the national agenda and financing the national agenda irrespective of the source of the money and irrespective of where the money is located, whether it's the UN or elsewhere. So now we're capturing all these ideas in our new plan of action, our new cooperation framework, which internally we agree on this direction of travel, and then we'll have to validate that with national partners, civil society, and other partners. And then globally, in 1 minute then, the Secretary General is then saying, we need a different kind of conversation. So from next week in New York, you're going to have a summit on the SDGs. If you look at the UN DESA report, no country around the world is due to meet the 17 goals or all of the targets. The ECA reports in Africa, the same. And why is that so? COVID-19 set many countries back by at least a generation. So imagine 1998, 1999 development in your country. For many countries, that's what they've gone back to. The war in Ukraine has also created its own dynamics. So all the issues that Ambassador Klunika mentioned are impacting on national development. So, and countries have to borrow money to finance COVID response. So if you don't have a different conversation around financing national development, countries are going to get into debt distress or they're unable to do it. And what is the result? Citizens are losing trust and legitimacy in their national leaders. So this whole idea of a common agenda about addressing digital harms, responding to the pandemic impact, and building efficient health systems, strengthening governance and human rights protection. If you do all of those, you'll be realizing the SDGs. So it's calling for a new solidarity, for effective multilateralism to help to achieve the SDGs, but to make the world safer for all of us.
I mean, just staying with you from everything that you've touched on, I'm just curious to know, what are we not doing that we should be doing? Just as you said, Africa in itself, I'll quote you onwards. Earlier today, you said it's the primary driver for modern growth. Yet, when you're looking at the continent and looking at the statistics that were mentioned earlier, very alarming. So what should we be doing differently?
I will respond in 3 words to give others a chance. First, development is not instant coffee. You can't dream it and things change. You have to work towards it. So it's protracted, it's not sexy, it's not attractive, but you've got to stay the focus. But 2 other words, which many countries in Africa are challenged with, or challenged by, because they have all the strategies, they have all the documents, is the leadership, is the purpose, sense of purpose. So if the leadership is deployed with a sense of purpose, you can overcome all the problems and address them. So many countries in Africa, the leaders make fancy statements, as my brother has said, not just the UN and God, it's fancy statements across the region or across the developing world, but this sense of purpose to translate that becomes challenging. And my final word is, what is it that we owe as leaders to our various publics, UN, governments, partners? Is hope. That people have hope that tomorrow will be better. People have a sense of hope that while their immediate needs are not resolved, they are seeing the efforts. It might be incremental, but it's forward moving, like that Johnny Walker bottle. Keep walking. It's forward moving to give them that sense of hope that their tomorrow will be better.
Interesting. Mr. Ronald, to bring you into the conversation, we've said you have been leading IFAD's resource mobilization efforts with quite an achievement we saw in 2021 when the fund set a record in its replenishing fundraising. Why is it important to ensure that the voices of these marginalized or less represented groups are also amplified?
Well, firstly, thanks, Fiona, and it's the first time I take the floor, so Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, very great to see you all here and very nice to be here from Rome and on behalf of IFAD. Firstly, just to go off script a little bit, I really enjoyed the opening session. We come to these events sometimes and opening sessions perhaps don't always grip you the way that they should. But I found it fascinating the different perspectives that come in from our UN partners through David, the Rwanda Corporation, who we're very grateful for hosting, and of course our resident coordinator. And a lot of the information that was transmitted is about thinking differently. The challenges that we face as a global community requires different thinking. And we know the definition of stupidity is doing the same things and thinking a different result. And for me, that is what South-South and Triangular Cooperation is all about. It's trying to disrupt the normal North-South forced delivery model and start to think of different ways of how we can empower people to drive their own development. And coming to marginalised people, IFAD is an institution that's specifically mandated to work in the most remote areas with the most marginalised rural people. So for us, it's very much in our DNA. Everything that we do has a context of trying to help those that need it most get a hand up. In South-South and Triangular Cooperation, probably I'll make 5 quick points of why engaging with disadvantaged and marginalised peoples is really important. Firstly, it's around, as our resident coordinator said, it's around inclusivity and equity. We won't achieve the Sustainable Development Goals unless we bring everyone forward. And recent shocks that we've had as a global community have really emphasised the point that none of us are safe until everyone is. And COVID provides some really good lessons there. Another point is around the importance of bringing in diverse perspectives. As a development practitioner and as a development institution, we've had some really painful lessons of how we've tried to force or be very supply-driven in terms of what solutions may work in one area, and we'll try and transplant them in another area where it might not be culturally appropriate, or it might not just be appropriate for the context of which we work in. So listening to people that perhaps don't have a voice and giving them an opportunity to have voice is really important in the work that we do. Another aspect of why marginalised and disadvantaged populations are important in South-South and Triangular Cooperation is around youth engagement and gender empowerment. In the agricultural space, we know that young people are moving away from rural areas and moving away from the agricultural sector. And this is a huge challenge for us as we face, as David said this morning, record levels of food insecurity and poverty. We need to find new ways of attracting young people into farming. And one lesson that we've learned is young people don't like listening to grey-haired bureaucrats from the United Nations. They will listen to their peers. They will listen to peers who are able to transmit new ways of farming that move forward from what their forefathers and mothers have done, leveraging technology, leveraging business, leveraging modernisation, and that's critically important. On the gender aspect, we know that agriculture in the developing world generally has a female face. And we need to make sure that we provide the right kind of support, we listen to what women need in rural areas, and we adapt our approaches and share good practices that actually work. My fourth point is around the importance of social and economic impact and achieving ownership and sustainability. We won't achieve, as I said, everyone moving forward and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals unless we specifically target those that are most marginalised. And we won't achieve sustainable impact unless people own, listen to and can drive their own development. So ensuring that ownership is really critical in order to make sure that everyone moves forward in the right kind of way. The final point that I'll make, and it's building on your point this morning, is around global commitments. And having different models of where those that are most marginalised and poorest and at most at risk of being left behind are brought forward, then we won't achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. There's a lot of concern from the food agencies at the moment around the achievement of SDG 2 and SDG 1, where we're off track. So again, the same thinking, the same approaches is not going to change the paradigm. And SSTC provides us a mechanism to think differently about how we approach development.
I think, Ambassador, I'll just bring into the conversation, thinking differently. That has been what Mr. Ronald has touched on. But what recommendations would you provide in achieving the SSTC more rapidly, if I may say, looking at the different interventions, ensuring that they are more of complementary rather than competitive, as it was earlier touched on how crucial it is to share knowledge, how crucial it is to collaborate. Maybe you could share some of the recommendations. And anyone from the panel could also chip in on that afterwards.
So I don't think that I have specific recommendation also to say that we have to collaborate. And I think you mentioned it rightly this morning, that we should not work in silos and rather work together, and having the three directors here at the same time, I think is something we really need to appreciate and promote as much as possible, showing that it's possible to work together. We need this kind of experiences that we share with the world, with other partners, that they see that it can be done. Of course, there will be some resistance, as they say that everyone likes to cook their own soup. But I think we need to understand that we are all basically cooking in the same pot. There is only one pot we are all cooking into, and we can all bring in our ingredients.
Mr. Ronald?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I think is really unique around South-South and Triangular Cooperation is its demand-driven nature. It's generally, and we heard some really good examples last night over dinner that the Rwanda Corporation are doing, of where there are certain countries or certain peoples within countries that have a demand to learn good experience from other neighbours and other neighbouring southern countries. So that is quite unique. So it's rather than a supply-driven development model, having countries and people wanting to share and exchange is a really big step forward. For us as an international financing institution, we're very much used to the provision of finance, the provision of technical support, the provision of policy and knowledge support. What's interesting for us is the increase in demand also for cooperation support. And as a multilateral institution, the way that we're able to support our member states with facilitating the exchange of good practices and knowledge in a demand-driven and a culturally sensitive way is a really big opportunity.
Mr. Ogiello.
Okay, maybe my recommendations address the member states because of the presence of ambassadors and high commissioners here, and I will not be making a recommendation to myself as the UN. We'd like to hear what others say to us we should do better and we should do differently. You know, when you look at the average African migrant, before they get to the shores of the Mediterranean to cross to go to Europe, they would have been in at least 1 or 2 third countries. And because they're in those third countries, they don't feel that the opportunities, the systems are sufficiently enabling that they will want to stay. And so they move. And yet we talk about Pan-Africanism, we call each other comrade, we talk about the transformation of our societies, all the instruments are there. But we are not enabling our own citizens from other countries to feel that they are African and to find the opportunity to leverage themselves in those countries and find fulfillment. And yet we have critical shortages of expertise and manpower in many African countries. And one of the arguments used to restrict presence of other Africans is the fear of terrorism. Well, Rwanda has an open visa policy. How many terrorists have entered? Or Mauritius, or Seychelles, or the Gambia. So that fear of the unknown that actually has no empirical foundation, it's part of the problem. Because if we allowed the free movement of people and goods and they can settle, we address the critical shortage gap, we address issues around polarization and hate speech and all the mobilizations that divide us, and then we can use every asset we find in our countries to transform. Many of us send our wives to go and give birth in some European countries, and automatically the child is born, they become a citizen. And we can't offer opportunities for our own fellow citizens in Africa to become contributors to our own development. For me, that's a fundamental game changer, if we can even begin to implement those policies.
Okay, thank you. Before we take parting shots from our panelists, I'd like to also hear from the audience. If anyone has a question or something they'd like to contribute to the conversation, please do raise your hand. Someone from the protocol team will give you a microphone. Kindly stand, tell us your name, and if it's a question, who you're directing it to.
Good evening, everybody. Oh, sorry, good morning, everybody. My name is Dominic Kahumbu from Biogas International. We're based in Kenya. I just want to add to a comment that the Madame made earlier about IP, intellectual property, in the whole technology transfer from south to south. I've done work with IFAD before in between 2012 and 2016, and we were introduced to the South-South cooperation as it was quite new at the time. And we went all the way to getting patent for a technology we developed, a biogas technology, which is revolutionary compared to the conventional systems. We learned then that patenting is not as simple as it. It's very simple to register, but then you have to patent per region. You have to patent per a larger region. Then you have to start patenting per country. So it becomes an extremely expensive affair. And then we have copycats anyway. And the copycats are normally very smart people who they know where because they can. A patent is an open document. So they can go to the patent platform, they can see where you're not patented, and then they start going to those countries. And they start replicating your product anyway. So you're spending huge amounts of money protecting a patent, and it's still being copied, and you can do jack, about it. So is there a way that, for instance, in that aspect, is any of that being taken into consideration for technology transfer from place to place? Number two, we all know that there's a standard saying in Africa that you will probably make more money developing your unique ideas in another country rather than back home, because back home people don't trust you. That's kind of standard around Africa. So it's always better to move to another country. The problem with that is finance. you can have a brilliant idea. I mean, things like M-Pesa, things like even our technology, I would say that they're revolutionary. They can really make a huge difference globally. But because of lack of finance, we can't move. You know, the M-Pesa was actually taken up by Safaricom and was made big, but the original designer didn't benefit at all. So these are the big questions that people, there's an age-old saying that says the richest place on the planet is the graveyard, because people go to the grave with their knowledge, because it'll get stolen if they don't, so they don't let it out. So how do we get those innovations onto the front line and let the people who actually develop those technologies benefit?
Okay. Any particular person you'd like to answer both questions?
No, it's to everybody.
It's
actually.
to everybody, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I think let's take one last question, if there is any. Okay, there's a hand.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Riziki from Republic United of Tanzania. I'm the PS in the Ministry of Livestock and Fisheries. Thank you very much for inviting me also to this gathering and the UN Day for South-South cooperation. Two things I just want either to add, or maybe if one can also put up a comment on that. One is from Ajo. You mentioned three things when you ended up with your, before the last word you said. But I think we also lack one thing that is important: maintaining systemic approach. You know, Minister here said he is in the fourth ministry. The good thing, I'm also in the third ministry. I've served in the Ministry of Industries and Trade. I've served in the ministry that is responsible for local government. I'm now serving as a PS in the Ministry of Livestock and Fisheries. But each time you go into that, you find the previous minister, the previous PS had a roadmap. But as you go there as a new person into that, you think the roadmap that was set by the previous leader is not suitable for you. You have to establish yours. And that is where I think we do fail. I think we need to maintain the systemic approach. You go into the office, you find what is there. You just find the best way of improving it, not abandoning it. Because if you abandon it, you will start afresh and we will be looking ourselves in that loop where we will not get out of it. The other thing, if a director mentioned about young people not being willing to stay in the rural areas, that is the fact. But why does that happen? We just had an HRF forum that ended last week in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. And one of the agenda that we discussed was about empowering youth and women. How do we empower youth? In Africa, if you find a young man with a farm, the farm would be less than 1 acre. So you will ask yourself, is this person going to dig using a hand hoe that 1 acre and bring in good payment for that? I think that is not possible. So in Tanzania, for example, we have started with a block farming. How do we do it? We have registered young people who is between 18 to 35 years old, and we give them 10 acres. We give them a seed money for them to do that, so that at least if they get a 20 years land lease, one can even go to a financial institution and say, look, I have my title deed, and this title deed can be useful for you to lend me a little money that I can also use in the production systems. But also in the livestock and fisheries, we also have this BBT, we call it BBT, Building Better Tomorrow Life, through livestock and fisheries, entrepreneurship. What we do, we have established fattening programs where we give seed money to the young people. They go to the primary market, they buy cow, and they fatten them. You can imagine we have 240 young men and women. And in the 3 months time, they have managed to get a total benefit of almost 30,000 USD. That is the lucrative deal. So what I'm bringing back here is that what we need to do, we have to ensure that we capacitate the youth so that they can see agriculture, livestock keeping as an important endeavor for them to stay in the rural areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister, for your contribution. Indeed, you've shared with us some of the lessons that could also be put in place in also other markets. We have a lady in the room. I think it's only fair if we could also have a bit of representation. Kindly keep it brief.
I'll try. Talking about global things, it's hard to keep things brief. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sukumbu Stefano. I'm a techpreneur in Kenya. We've spoken, the panel have spoken about the fact that we shouldn't be absorbing or having things from the north crammed onto us. And I totally agree, and I want to argue that one of the biggest things that we've done wrong on our continent is our agriculture. We've taken models from the north and we have forced them onto the south, and they don't work. Our food problems are because of that today. The youth are leaving the farms, but before they left, the soil microbes left because we damaged our soils. And our soils underpin everything. They underpin our climate, they underpin our health, they underpin livestock health, crop health, and even human health. And we can see that across agricultural spaces where soils are depleted, there is no civilization that has outlived its soils, and it's soils that has driven civilizations to diminish. And we're doing that, and we're doing it all the time. And the models that we're engaging do not look at soil microbiology. It is fundamental and the most important thing. The EU last month put in a law to protect soils. When is Africa going to do it? Why are we waiting to see the North do things that we should have been doing a long time ago? Without our soils, our youth will never make profits. Things can be done differently, but it means that we need to really dig down. Each and every country on our continent, south to south, we've got a lot of information that can be shared. There are people that are doing things the right way. It's not being shared. I like what one of the speakers said today, that we should not just have our fists clenched and expect to move forward. It is time that we really do start looking at our problems from the grassroots, from the soil microbiology. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you indeed. Agriculture is a very crucial sector to the continent's GDP. 60% arable land, yet when you look within the continent, high levels of food insecurity. I think we're going to come back to the panel. If we could start by responding to the question, and then we'll take the parting shots. Could you start, Mr. Ronald?
Yeah, happy to. The first question with respect to patents and intellectual property rights, maybe I'll answer it through a different perspective. One thing on a panel dealing with multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder partnerships we haven't discussed is the private sector. And we know in the UN we've had an agenda of billions to trillions for a number of years, which, if we're honest, hasn't delivered the results that we would expect. So we need different thinking about how we can engage the private sector in a meaningful way. And us as multilaterals, we have a role in assisting governments with providing enabling policy frameworks, enabling regulatory frameworks that provides the incentives for the private sector to invest in those areas that are less favourable. And in this circumstance on intellectual property rights, I'd say that is a point forward. On the access to finance, I mean, that's critical. And quite often in our space with small-scale farmers who IFAD particularly focuses on with other RBAs as well, access to finance is a major factor of being able to expand business, to farm in a more regenerative way, etc. And without that, it's very, very difficult to make sure that innovations are scaled. One comment just to answer the PS, which I completely agree with, is your first point on the mismatch between short-term political cycles and long-term development thinking and responses. And this is a huge challenge. We were at the G20 over the weekend, and trying to have a dialogue around long-term investment to deal with some of the global challenges that we face when politicians are worried about a 3-year political or 4-year political term is a very big mismatch. And we need to collectively, with voices from people, come up with solutions.
Yes, your parting shots in just a few words.
A few words, yeah. I would say South-South and Triangular cooperation, facilitating innovations for the Global South, by the Global South is a key opportunity.
Okay, Mr. Ojielo, also just parting shots in a few words, and if you'd like to also add on to what has been said.
Well, my parting shot is that the UN is a member state organization, so all my bosses are here. The ambassadors. So we're looking forward to my bosses to take these issues forward and make the UN very relevant and to transform the world for all of us. On the issue that have been raised, there are many things that could be said, but I think the biggest issue I take from what you said, Dominic, is that locally, we need to generate the resources, the investment to support entrepreneurship, initiative, and ideas. And some governments are doing it, not on a good scale, because the kind of idea you talked about, we ought to be able to enable you through the government of Kenya, for example, to be able to create a pattern, find private sector initiators who can finance it, and then they become equity partners with you, for example. There are many ways to skin a cat. The challenge is that you have to do it alone, all by yourself. And there are many Kenyans with lots of money, but with lots of properties in Westlands that are unoccupied. So it's about shifting the priorities, but creating the space for those new prioritization to happen, the degree of relationship between government and private sector to drive innovation and agenda setting. Everything else I agree with my colleague Ron.
Okay, thank you. Ambassador, in just a few words as well.
Thank you very much. I want to come back to the issue of intellectual property. It's something we also have been facing, as I mentioned, and I think we would be happy to have a conversation with all interested parties. I don't have a response to your questions, but we are open really to discuss and find solutions on these challenges we see, specifically to protect our young innovators, as you rightly mentioned. So I hope my team will get in your contact so that we can really organize an event where we really discuss this very important and crucial issue. So being the host, I think I will not be long. I need to look on the time. So I totally agree with my co-panelists. What I think is clear again is the theme of this celebration: solidarity, equity, and partnerships. I think this is crucial. This transpired from what we have been discussing, and I hope it will also inform the further discussions we will be having. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's no better way to conclude this panel than to end on the words of what you have just said. Round of applause to our amazing panelists. Thank you so much. We still have amazing conversations lined up, but for now, I'd like to ask if you want to go, grab your coffee, grab tea, grab something to drink, and come right back. We'll continue the conversations. We're going to have a few minutes break, but please feel free to bring your drinks here as we continue the conversations within the next few minutes. Thank you all.
such a rush, my baby, slow down, come find your love. I'm hoping you see me, come serve it up. Loving when you stir it up, that body belong on TV. Oh, this feeling I can't hide. You're feeling up my mind, and I just don't know why. I just don't know why.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. If we could all kindly have our seats. Once again, welcome everyone. I'd say that this morning session has really set the right pace for the conversations to follow. We heard from different stakeholders on what it really takes to mobilize multi-stakeholder partnerships to unlock potential of SSTC. And we're now going to get into a more focused panel discussion on achieving zero hunger. We're going to have multiple speakers for this particular session, and because of that, and as well as limited time, we may not have time for questions and answer for this particular panel, but conversations will follow right after that. I'm going to welcome our panelists to the stage. So once again, give them a warm round of applause as they walk one by one to the stage. I'm going to start with Engineer Pascal Gatabazi, Technical Advisor, Minister of Education, Rwanda. A round of applause as he comes to the stage. We also have Mr. David Katrud, Director of the Program and Humanitarian Division at WFP. A round of applause as well. Our third panelist is Mr. Amat, the Managing Director, Africa Green Revolution Forum. A round of applause as he comes to the stage. Also, help me welcome our amazing moderator for this session. We have Ms. Vanja Karanovic, Program Policy Officer at World Food Program.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone, again. Excellencies, distinguished speakers, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen. I could not agree more to what Ron said. This was a fantastic morning. So thank you all for this wealth of information and knowledge, and I hope we continue this way for the rest of the day. It's my honor to be today here with all of you, and in this special occasion of the celebration of the UNSSTC Day. And particularly, I am excited to be here because for the past 10 years I've dedicated my career to the school feeding programs, and I've seen how big impact they have on the ground. In almost all countries in the world, there is some sort of school feeding program. And when we say school meals, people think only about the plate of food. But in fact, school feeding is much more than that. It is also giving opportunities to farmers, especially women. And naturally, in all countries, there are many farmers growing food close to the schools, but we are not utilizing that. Thanks to homegrown school feeding programs, they can now sell what they produce to schools. And a woman can benefit a lot from these programs. There are about 4 million of jobs created every year through these initiatives. For each dollar invested in the school feeding program, there is at least $9 in return. So we are gathering here today at the global communities currently grappling with a surge in poverty and food security that has eroded years of development milestones. The limited financial resources need now to be targeted towards interventions that are more cost-effective and can ensure a bigger impact on the ground. Often in the past, we have heard that the UN system needs to be more coordinated and efficient and ensure a meaningful collaboration amongst its operational arms, especially at country level, in order to use each agency's comparative advantages. This is exactly why the Rome-based agency started to go through this joint program that focuses on the homegrown school feeding. The agencies use the South-South and triangular cooperation mechanism that is gaining increasing importance in the development landscape to support countries in sharing successful experiences of other countries that manage to achieve some results. This is what SSDC is all about. But now we need to take and make a step ahead in the main objective of this plenary today is to enable a dialogue on how the SSDC mechanism can be used to build partnerships so that we can effectively scale up solutions to strengthen national homegrown school feeding programs where it's needed the most. This year we have with us member state representatives, academia, international organization, international financial institutions, private sector and civil society representatives. And we would like to explore and support funding mechanisms that will enable the RBA to expand its impact on the ground. But before we start, and I introduce you to our exceptional panelists, I would like to invite you to take a look at the short video on the homegrown school feeding in Rwanda.
byadufashije muri byinshi kubera yuko mbere yo twagemuraga umwe ntago amafaranga twaboneraga hamwe ariko uyu munsi wa none baraza n'ubundi bagafata iryo soko tugahingira hamwe kandi n'amafaranga akazira hamwe na cyane ko tumubwira akabanza akadushyira hehe kuri konte n'ubundi yaho tubitsa.
Thank you for watching the video, which tells the story about the bold investment that the government of Rwanda is providing daily meals to 3.8 million of children, which is really expiring, and it shows and acts as a global example of the government commitment. But now, not to take too much of the time from this panel, dedicated for the more interesting discussions now ahead of us, I would like to introduce, we are here with the three panelists, but we will also have the three interventions directly from the field. So we will have also Mr. Mahfouz Sarr, who will be speaking on behalf of Senegal. Then we will have Mr. Dagwami Habte Selassie, who will be speaking on behalf of Rwanda IFAD, and we will have Ms. Carola Kengot, who will be speaking on behalf of WFP Kenya. I would like to introduce the first speaker and set the scene for this event. So, Mr. Gatabazi, please, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning once again. My name is Pascal Gatabazi. I'm from the Ministry of Education. My minister was supposed to be here, but he made a very good communication to Ambassador that he'll be were represented. So I want to give you a little bit of the context of the triangular South-South cooperation as regard to the school meals. I wanted to share with you the context that at the global level, there is a movement towards school meals. We call it the Global Coalition of School Meals, which Rwanda is part of. And this was launched on the UN, the UNGA 2021 during the Food System Summit. And Rwanda upfront was a member already. And I happen to be the focal person of Rwanda on that Global School Meals Coalition. Now, yes, school meals in Rwanda, it's one of the top priorities of this country. We look at school meals as an investment, not just expenditure. If you look at the journey, Rwanda, number of years, not very many back, we were having around maybe, considering also the population of Rwanda, we were having about 600 some students being given school meals in 9-year basic education, sometimes back in 2014. But we have scaled, by 2021, we have scaled and trying to have every kid receive a meal at school. And this has increased the government investment in school meals from about $5 million to close to $90 million as we speak. The model allows a little bit of parents' contribution. I'm just sharing experience. At primary level, those who get a day meal at school, the parents contribute about 10%. The government takes about 90% of the investment. So we look at it as an investment, not just expenditure. We see multiple results of school meals. We are able to reduce significantly issues around school dropouts. When school get meal, apart from health issues and not be hungry, but also reduces school dropouts in remote areas. But it also increases learning outcomes. The kids are able to stay at school and concentrate. We're also seeing the positive correlation with the learning outcomes. Now, I'm not sharing the entire. We have a robust, comprehensive national policy on school meals that puts in the structures, how it is regulated from national level to school level. This is, we call it the homegrown solution because it allows empowering smallholder farmer. So it's a multi-sectoral venture, if I can call it so. You'll find the business community, the agriculture, the health, the education, all the partners as part of this intervention. I wanted also to share with you the bit of the South-South cooperation. I'm happy to tell you that just recently in June, we brought down the Global Coalition to East Africa Coalition, and we were happy to host it here in Kigali. We had 9 countries participating. The 7 East Africa, the Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Burundi, DRC, and then South Sudan. We also invited colleagues from Ethiopia and Somalia. So we were sharing experiences. We believe that people of the same context can learn better. So we have a number of interventions that we are working on, from the research that you want to the nutrition element. You come in the sustainable financing, the data and monitoring. Also, we look into what else? Issues to do partnership with. That's where we have development partners coming in. Also, there is another intervention. I'll come back to that. So I wanted to really to share with you that's a very good model that we have cascaded from the global engagement to south to south. So we are learning from one another. When we had colleagues here, we were able to visit the schools and see the real business taking place in school. There were a lot of appreciation. So we can communicate here that we have got a lot to share as colleagues of the same context. So maybe I may limit it here and hear from colleagues. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yes, definitely. School feeding is a multifaceted program, and we've heard this morning. It's really, in a way, a unique one, which combines the education, agriculture. It's the largest safety net in the world, and it really has multiple benefits on a long run. Mr. David Katrut, can I please invite you to give us your notes? Thank you.
Sure, thanks so much. And I'll take inspiration from Ronald earlier and go a bit off script because I've been jotting notes about things that have been said or not said to maybe bring some attention to that. And I'll also inspired by the RC, so I'll try to be as brief as possible along his model. So, school feeding, and thank you so much for the ministry's insight on the evolution of the School Meals Coalition. It wasn't intuitive when we first started to link school feeding with the food systems a couple of years ago. What happened recently in the food system stock taking that was in Rome is we went, not only did it have prominence as a vehicle for food systems, but we were able to convey a message that school feeding can actually be an agent to transform food systems. And homegrown school feeding is very much part of that trajectory. Not only, school meals does other things as well. So I'm mentioning food systems because it didn't come up enough so far in the discussion, but when the SDG Summit happens next week, the SG will be promoting food systems and their transformation as an accelerator of the SDGs because it touches on 11 SDGs. And positioning school meals in that as one of the really successful efforts in that regard, of course, puts it in a great position to also touch on many of the SDGs. Now, the school meals can be transformative because I think we all understand homegrown can help with smallholder farmers. It can help empower women who can be brought into providing certain commodities in that effort. We also know that as we incentivize children to go to school, allow them to pay attention to what they're learning, we have an opportunity to insert into the curriculum things that relate to climate sensitivity or nutrition sensitivity and so on. So it offers a real possibility to move forward. And on food systems, we can also change consumption patterns to start promoting indigenous crops, which we're going to have to do in this era of the climate crisis, promoting sorghum and millet and other things. That can be done through school feeding and the homegrown variety. Now, the school meals and of course the homegrown aspect of it is a proven concept. And with this coalition that was just mentioned, we have the political will. It is very impressive. As we sit here today, it's nearly 80 countries. Rwanda was indeed a pioneer and a pathbreaker on that regard, but 80 countries are involved. And those are from the developed world, the developing world, north and south. These represent nearly 60% of the world's population is now represented of that coalition. And there's some 80 plus partners mobilized, UN for sure, private sector, civil society, and this really brings that vision of a new way of approaching development that is multi-stakeholder, that is whole of society, whole of government, whole of UN. So all of this is happening in this new approach powered by that School Meals Coalition. And I'm speaking as WFP, we are a secretariat there. We're no way leading that effort. It's a collective effort led by member states and key stakeholders, but we're definitely trying to help and contribute. Now, the school meals and the homegrown area is, of course, we've talked about the multifaceted aspect, so it can be an agent of this whole of society, multi-stakeholder approach. Because of that, we can touch on the education curriculum as well as promoting rural development and other aspects. So it becomes this platform for partnership that we need to fully exploit. And in that regard, the interesting thing about, as we look at school meals, and this goes back to points raised this earlier, that we don't want supply-driven, top-down development, but there are things going on in the world that are valuable, so we need mechanisms to capture best practice and then pay good attention to listening to those on the ground, giving voice and listening to those on the ground, and pay due attention to how we then apply a given best practice, to customize, to tailor, to adapt a given best practice to a new environment. That's key. And South-South helps tremendously in that regard. If we get the right South-South partners, Rwanda certainly having the potential to be one of those, we can help with that adaptability and customization of best practice. So this also, homegrown, we find is very tailored and so forth. And that's because the way it's being pursued, and this is a best practice in itself, is listening to communities, have communities empowered and invested in these approaches that benefit them. But what's really unique about this is that it links to national social protection agendas, because this is the largest social safety net, school feeding. So if we do this right, we have community empowerment aligned and coherent with national policies, agendas, and systems. So this is a vision that we at WFP are trying to promote as we approach this. Maybe a couple of quick points. Now, this is clearly a mechanism, South-South in general, for knowledge exchange. We've talked about that. And in the case of homegrown school feeding, we are really lucky to have a whole set of best practice we have access to. We have partners that can help deliver it. And Rwanda will join that at some point, I'm sure, where this has really been taken root and been a success and is now offering, and I'm talking in the case of Brazil, which has a dedicated center of excellence that provides support to now 70 countries on homegrown school feeding. We have that resource at our collective disposal. China was mentioned this morning. They have a center of excellence in various collaborations with the RBAs. They also are finding ways to transmit those best practices. And here on the African continent, there's a center of excellence in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, also in engaging in knowledge exchange that touch on areas that enhance the promotion of homegrown school feeding. Now, one thing that wasn't mentioned this morning about knowledge exchange, so you have the capturing best practices, you have the adaptation elsewhere, and the UN plays a role. It was mentioned by the RC that should be very strategic, and normative was touched on as well. What we didn't mention is the development of global public goods. And this is a powerful concept that we all have to understand a bit more, because something like homegrown school feeding and some of these local practices growing up in the global south that we will work to transmitting are in themselves global public goods that need to be captured, identified, developed, and taken forward. Another aspect of knowledge exchange is innovation. Now that was touched on a lot today, but innovation is not just a throwaway point. There's a lot involved in working to really nurture an innovative, first identify, capture, and work with that idea, to nurture it, to bring it along, to accelerate, particularly in this time of various crises, and then to scale these things. We have so many interesting, innovative ideas out there, but the issue is oftentimes how do we scale? And so I know we, the RBAs, are looking a lot at this scaling issue, and I believe that was also touched on earlier. Now, I see that the time is ticking, so I will now conclude there, but happy to exchange either bilaterally in the margins or certainly here in the panel itself if time allows. So thank you, Vanya.
Thank you, David, and I'm very happy that you mentioned food systems because it perfectly fits into the speech of the next speaker. Please, Mr.
Thank you very much. And maybe let me start with an African wisdom. You know, as an African, we always like to share proverbs because we receive it from our grandfathers, our mothers, you know, uncle. There was an old man, you know, who has been in his village for many years and struggling with kids, grandkids, and so on. And he was still poor, you know, and he promised that before he died, he will help to change the life of his family. So he met a guy in his own village who gave him a story like there is a place when you go there, there is wealth, because he was looking for wealth in his village for many years, couldn't find it. And he started his journey, even old, going. Say, okay, let me go for some months, I will get there and be back. So he promised to the family to come back. In his journey, he's been walking all the tired few months and then end up somewhere close to a river where he was really exhausted, but he was close to the final destination without energy. And suddenly he met another guy who was going to the opposite direction, where he's coming from. And he asked him, where are you going? He told him that I'm going to this village. It happened that that village is his village. He said, what are you doing there? Because there we are poor. We have nothing. It's tough. And he told him, no, I'm going to get wealth. And I was told it's this, this, and this. So he opened his eyes and he said, wow. He just realized that that guy was going to his village to improve his life with information and element which he was living there, but he couldn't see it. In reality, the wealth was there. But the fact that they meet, and he shared that story, he just discovered that he did not really need to go far away after living so many years to just know that where he is coming from, there was wealth. The message and the moral of the history is we meet, we share, because sometimes where you are, you don't necessarily see it. And sometimes the one coming far away can just tell you after one discussion that this is the solution. And I think that's also the essence of South-South cooperation. So the second message is a forum. The Africa Food System Forum, by the way, from this year, we transitioned completely from Africa Green Revolution Forum for Africa Food System Forum. So all those young kids we meet in the village when we go on mission, or when we just go on holiday, or wherever you are in our continent, either they are your brothers, sisters, relative, the food that we are trying to put on their table from school, from the household, the food has a journey. It comes from also those brave women, farmers, those brave guys who have boda transporting it, the people who are doing manufacturing, taking it into boat until your final destination. So it's an entire ecosystem where you have so many people trying to get that food right, healthy, nutritious, inclusive, resilient. So at the end of the day, you eat and you can sleep. And those kids today in many schools, I think most of us who are here may be privileged. And this morning I took my kids at school. It was my first week of school after I came from the forum completely exhausted. But the first thing I was asking was, the food they will eat at lunchtime, and you're paying for it. But there are people they can't pay. And their kids are going to school to get that knowledge. And we do have also the responsibility to make it inclusive, that the same way you are paying for a school and paying that food, those who cannot, from a social protection perspective, it happen. And all that ecosystem along the food system value chain make sure that that food is on the table, healthy, and then safe, accessible, and affordable for those kids. So why we are doing it, I think our colleague said, it's a longer-term investment. There is no society without human capital. When you are not eating, when you are not, even if you go to school and you are hungry, you can't get anything. And those kids are the one who will be also our youth and our women. So last week, we were in Tanzania. I thought that I was the only one who recovered quickly to come here, but I saw the PS and I saw my colleagues from IFAD, which means we are all engaged, after months of preparation, and it was the largest ever AGRF since the creation. So almost 3 times that one we used to have here in Kigali. So 1 year it's in Kigali, another year in another African country. It was 5,400 delegates, more than 90 countries represented, 1,200 businesses, 80 UN international organization, farmers organization. And we deliberately put youth and women at the center. We even create a youth dome. For us, I think this South-South triangular cooperation should not be a tourism. In many South-South triangular cooperation, you see also people from government, they have done 20 times like these things, 100 times. But we should now start thinking about young people coming and seeing like tech, how did they do it in this country? What am I struggling? Maybe this guy know it in Zimbabwe and can take it to Nigeria, can put it in Mali. So this time we were deliberate to bring migrants. We even organized a TED Talk to tell them, please share your story. And all of them were young people, So we were challenged by, they need to know how to talk, but we really don't care about the format. Let them talk. At the end of the day, a format also restricts creativity and innovation. So it was there, and I think this year it was also innovation from going to the field and see, not into in meetings. And that impact also local economy, Zanzibar, and Bagamoyo, other places. So all this shows you what is happening on the ground from a solution, and those people can be also challenged and share. But also, more importantly, when we were going there, we went this year with RCB, Rwanda Cooperation Initiative. It was first time, because we were challenged by the venue. They are doing it several times. So we went also as a partnership to see how we can do things differently. And they saw, and they grow also because they have seen another context. And they have learned, and they say, these things, we'll do it differently in Rwanda. So it's also cooperation between countries. And our forum is a marketplace. In the Asian Rome, forum was where people sit and discuss issues. We are discussing the issue of feeding our kids for the future generation and also to transform. So this forum should be one of the most important as the climate COP. I don't think food, if you don't eat, you can maybe afford not putting clothes and anything, but not eating for 2 days, you will be in trouble. It's as important as climate change. And for Africa, if Africa is not well, there is nowhere in the continent, the world we will be well. I will maybe just to end, say the forum has a political power. We had head of state, former head of state, businesses, leaders, all of them coming to share ideas, set the direction for the continent, but also the programs which we will be doing. The policies are there. Now the how. And the how, again, this year we deliberately set like a kind of booth exhibition for people to show we can do better. We don't necessarily need big equipment, affordable one, some that are easy, that can help accelerate when it is working well in Rwanda. And we are proud to see also a country where things are working, although any challenge can be seen. But we will be also more proud that it's working everywhere on the continent. That's why anything we are doing and we are seeing in one country, we are taking it to another one. So that place has been a venue for people to share experiences, to challenge themselves, and then get different cards. So future with Rwanda Cooperation Initiative as part of our 2023-2027 strategy is, since we're based here and half of the forum happened in Rwanda, it's normal that we have a Rwanda special program. So we've discussed it with all Rwanda Development Board, RCB, and also I visited you. So we put content on a year-round activities. So forums are good, but in between the forum is more important. What do we do? And this year, PS was talking about the BBT. It has been a vision, but we deliberately work with them and said, if it is a vision, let's work with you to make it as an investment program. As a result, for this forum, 600 million was pledged from World Bank, IFAD, many other partners, USAID, and it will be now the beginning of the implementation of that vision that was there for the government. Because we used to have forums, people do declaration, they go. The last part is MSMEs, young people. They were there. They were in many deal rooms. And the deal rooms are not yet perfect. Some young guys come with project of $1,000 US. You put them in a deal room of $1 million, so they will just waste their time. So there is a way we need to set it and reset it to be more like a banking system. So as a forum, we have technical platform that can help de-risk those businesses. When they go to the bank, it's faster. So you do not go to the bank to be sent back your project and your hope and then you abandon. But some people also handhold you to accelerate. So I think this is the future to collaboration which we will set here as a market all place, but also as a SSTC to make sure that all the good things that are being done by UN organization partners can be shared between the different countries. Thanks.
Thank you so much, and I believe that all of us here in the room can agree that we need a more holistic setup and approach to South-South. Let's not reduce the exchanges only between the governments because the opportunities are many, and as you mentioned rightfully, it's important for the whole society engagement and all sorts of stakeholders. Now, please allow me to move to next panelists who will be telling us some insightful information from the field. We have 3 of them. May I invite Dr. Mahfouz Sarr from Senegal, who will be joining us virtually to share their experience from Senegal.
Thank you so much. Do you hear me? Thank you so much. I would thank you to invite us for inviting us to the UN Day for SCC to share our work we are doing now here in Senegal between FAO, IFAD, and WFP regarding home ground school feeding here in Senegal. We work, the agency, RBAs work closely here in Senegal to support the government to implement and to prepare a project on the school feeding program based on local production. As we know, the school feeding is really important for the government and was really spotlighted when the Senegalese government and Senegalese all stakeholders are preparing the United Nations Food System Summit. And for the RBAs supporting the government for a whole ground school full feeding to support the Senegalese government dedication to school feeding with a comprehensive strategy. It is really important for us. And sure also school boys are nourished with meals made from local production. And the other objective of this program also is to boost the production and sale of produce, benefiting from parents and also from small-scale producers. It is important because we're talking about home ground, and with our comparative advantages, all agencies are working to boosting production and also benefiting and to support also some value change in the ground level. This project is around $5 million and for 4 years. And one aspect really important also is to engage many ministries. We know that the home ground school feeding is a multi-sectorial approach, So here in Senegal, we engage the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Health and Social Action, and also the National Nutrition Development Council. It is really important because at the national level, we have all this intersectionality approach, and on the ground also, we engage many stakeholders. And this program we are preparing also it is in line with the government policies. I would talk about the Senegal Plan Senegal Emergent. And this access to on the development of human capital, prioritizing education and training, nutrition, and social protection. We already said that it is really important to consider social protection when we talk about home ground school feeding. And also recently, the government are preparing a national school feeding program, and aims to nourish 1.4 million children across 7,500 public elementary schools by 2028. And this program is engaged to support the government on his policy. And our program, we have 4 components of this program. Strengthening component 1, strengthening resilience of households and produce organization integrating agri-food value chain. Component 2, offering healthy, varied and nutritional school meals. component through working on communication and support for the education community, and component for building government capacity to gradually oversee the program. It is important if we do all the home groundwork, it is really important to support the government going further and to prepare all necessary scaling up of good practices we already developed and we already also implement on the ground. We target also some areas, the areas where already FAO, IFAD, and WFP have already experiences there, and where WFP already supported schools, school canteen there. And so when we merge all these experiences on the ground, we think that we'll go further and faster, and so to implement good practices already developed, and also engage locally farmers and other stakeholders to work together to develop a really strong synergy of action, and also the complementarity as already done in the past throughout our project. And our target is 56 elementary schools. Already WFP have experiences on that. And also we engage what we call here the Dara, it is the Quranic schools. It is really developed in Senegal and at rural areas, and to see how we can engage this to reinforce the resilience of these farmers and also supporting this kind of education. And to close my speech, you all to see the next steps. Now we are developing the project, and will in the coming months to meet the governments, all ministries, to share all the document, project document, and also organize national consultation at local level and national level also to meet all the stakeholders. And also we plan to have to organize a donor meeting, yes, to collect the funds to go further to implementation of the project. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mahfouz, and it's actually very beautiful to see how the programs evolve. And as we've already heard from Mr. Gattavazzi, that it's very important, actually, the work at the policy level. And I can tell you that maybe 10 years ago, when we look back as the World Food Programme who was supporting school feeding programs around the world, we really had few policies, national policies on school feeding program, but now you would be surprised how much it evolved and how much we moved forward. So in fact, there is a lot to share and a lot to learn also, as we can see from the region, not just across the ocean. Thank you again, and now I would like to ask another panelist who is here with us in the room, Mr. Dagmawi Habteselassie. If somebody can pass him a microphone, please. Thank you, the floor is yours. You can sit, you can stand, however you prefer.
I'll stand. Thank you very much, and thank you. On behalf of my colleagues from the RBAs, I'll talk a bit about what we're looking to do here with homeschool feeding. I think the RBAs here in Rwanda have had a tight relationship. We've included also, in addition to our three agencies, have brought in UNICEF as part of the discussion to see how we can work together and work on improving the home school feeding system. And I think my brother from the Ministry of Education has spoken a lot, given the context a bit, but maybe something to add. I think in 2019 is when the government passed the policy for national school feeding and a strategy, and which called for comprehensive and universal coverage focusing on WASH and nutrition. And I think we had conversations earlier about walking the talk and implementation being the challenges in most of what we do. And government Rwanda here, I think, in the past year has doubled their budget for school feeding. They went from 33 to even more than double, to about 74, and have covered from 660,000 to 3.8 million children. And I think something that's very commendable, and maybe a round of applause to the ministry leading on these initiatives. So school feeding in Rwanda has gone well, but there's obviously challenges. One of the main challenges is the costs. Food, I think we've had inflation throughout the continent and way beyond the continent. And the cost of school feeding is not just the cost of food. We have the cost of transportation, infrastructure, implementation, and those things have risen over the years. And that has been a challenge to see how we can sustainably keep this infrastructure going. There's also limited challenges in meeting nutritional standards due to fortified foods. There's limited availability of fortified foods. I think we WFP with other partners have engaged with some of the private sector partners doing that, but there's still a gap in filling that. And while ambitious, the school feeding program in Rwanda is still in the early stages, and we've heard from colleagues here that there's other countries that have had a lot of experience as well. So using SSTC as a leverage to bring in lessons from other places around the globe to see how we can improve it and make it more sustainable is something that we're keen on doing as RBAs. Why RBAs? So 3 agencies coming together. I think you've heard a bit of our comparative advantage. I think FAO on the technical expertise, on the policy side, IFAD, we invest as the most vulnerable, as my director said, and improving agriculture value chains. And WFP has been leading, especially in Rwanda, on the homegrown school feeding program and the implementation of it. And homegrown school feeding partnership has happened in Rwanda without really being so intentional about it. I think IFAD invests a lot on the dairy sector. We have a major dairy program which has helped increase the availability of milk in the country. That milk, with the increased availability, there was excess milk that some private sector companies has brought and were able to deliver to schools, which WFP has been supporting. And FAO helped us with the livestock farm field schools that we worked on. So this partnership has happened before, maybe not as intentional as we want it to be, but I think this is, as we go forward, looking into the ministry's plans and what they're looking to do is how do we support this and how do we bring different expertises coming in. So moving forward, what we have in plan is, first of all, I think, as mentioned earlier, Rwanda has a lot to share. And what we did and how we're implementing. I think that's one thing that we can be proud of as Rwandans and people working in Rwanda is when, it's not just a policy, but the implementation and going on the ground and making it happen is something there. And I think there's a lot we can share with other countries on how we implement here on the side. But also, from other countries, important to see what models will make this more sustainable, how we can improve the benefits of the homegrown school feeding. I think all of us in this room see it. For IFAD, FAO, WFP, access to markets for smallholder farmers, smaller value chain, more resilient food systems, and also reduce costs for governments and the schools and the parents in ensuring that our kids are able to eat healthy food and be able to learn and grow and become an important part of our society. So maybe one last point before I hand over to my colleagues. I think it's important as we move forward, looking at sustainability, that we emphasize private sector partnership in this. I think most of us have talked about the importance of new partnerships coming into this. And as we move forward into the PSTA 5 of the government and the NSC 2, and seeing how we can really leverage the knowledge, the technology, and the linkages to ensure that they're able to contribute to these initiatives, improve our efficiencies, and improve the overall meals provided to our kids. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and it's very inspiring to see how things are coming along in Rwanda. So now I would like to introduce the next panelist, our colleague Carola, who will be speaking a bit on Kenya's example. If I may say that so far Kenya has been, I can't call it officially center of excellence, but if I may say, I would like to say that they have done an amazing work at the both policy and program level when it comes to the whole school health and nutrition agenda. Over to you, Carola.
Thank you very much, and yeah, really a pleasure to be here with you today. My name is Carola Kengott, and I'm Head of Social Protection Safety Nets in WFP Kenya, and of course very passionate about the agenda of South-South cooperation. Let me just start to congratulations to Rwanda for, first of all, taking leadership in this important event, but also all their investments in school feeding. I think that's really remarkable. And I'm very honored to share with you today Kenya's story, which is quite interesting as well. So school feeding, I think, has a very, very firm place in the hearts of Kenyans. It's been around since the 1980s and has been a safety net for the most vulnerable children and families and communities. They look back at a long journey of school feeding, with the program having transitioned from WFP to the government in 2018. Homegrown school feeding started with RBA support in 2009. That experience of the transition has led to a very active South-South cooperation exchange. So there were countries like Namibia, Chad, Bangladesh, Mozambique, Gambia, and Togo, all already in active visits, exchanges with Kenya on the experience of transition. And I think that also really ties in with the opportunity of the Rwandan-led East Africa School Feeding Network, which is an excellent platform to share experiences, but also inspire leadership and investments in these programs. But recently, school feeding has kind of reached a whole new level of importance and dialogue in Kenya, and that's the story I'm really keen to share with you. And to do that, I'll just take you with me now on a virtual journey back to Kenya. So, you know, Kenya, as all of you know, has just emerged from the worst drought in 40 years. Severe drought, almost 5 million people dependent on humanitarian assistance. And one of the hardest hit places, it's really these arid counties in the northeastern part of the country. And so on a recent journey and on a recent mission to Mandera, which is the most northeastern county bordering Somalia and Ethiopia, we visited a school which was benefiting from that national program. And so we met this little girl, Camilla, 10 years old, and she was just describing it in such kind of plain words, right? To say, well, when there's no food in schools, I don't have energy, I can't concentrate. So now we're so happy to have food, and we hope it comes every day now, and that government brings us food to go forward, because it's really kind of one of these points that make us attract to go to school, and also relieves the family's pressure in the times of the drought. So that was at the height of the drought, really. And then speaking to her mother, she just explained to us how, knowing her kids in school, she knew her kids were safe. It allowed her to go out, look for firewood, go after her productive activities. But it's been really come so clearly from her how she said, it's such a safety net, yeah? And so this was just one county, but a lot of the counties and Kenyan people have called on government and on development partners to maintain and leverage that investment in the school meals program, and it particularly came out in the height of the drought, because also if you look at a county like Mandera, lots of livestock died because of water scarcity. A lot of people were forced to migrate in search of water pastures, meaning there were many, many kids out of school. In Kenya in total, an estimated 2.5 million children were at risk of not returning. And so knowing that for many of them the school meal was the first and for some the only meal a day was absolutely crucial. And then what we have seen was absolutely impressive. So the government has recognized this risk, not only in terms of the emergency, but also as a risk of its future human capital. And the president has announced in February that he would more than double its national investments in the program, and they have made good on it. So Kenya went from the yearly $15 million US investment in the program to 40 million this year, which is tremendous. At the same time, Kenya has also not stopped there. So within the Global School Meals Coalition, they set targets of scaling up the program from the 1.8 million children in school receiving school meals by the beginning of the year to 4 million children by June 2024. And they want to reach 10 million kids by 2027. So a very clear, a very steep scale-up plan. and we're all very much impressed with the commitment and the investments in there. However, we've also seen that due to the drought and other factors, a lot of the food is still being imported. There's a heavy dependence on imports, which is a challenge if you look at a country with a high debt burden, with in times of austerity. And so this is where tremendous opportunity at the moment is for the RBAs as brokers for South-South cooperation and for many, many other partners, not only to co-invest and to help on that scale-up, which the Ministry of Education and the National Council for Nomadic Education, which is in charge of the program, are currently working with us on, with also together with the Rockefeller Foundation. So we are in this process of it, but also they said, in order to not only reach and protect the kids in school, but kind of cushion whole communities from the future detrimental effects of climate change that we've just seen, we need to do it in a smart way. And that's going to be climate smart homegrown school feeding in Kenya, which is going to be at the center of it. And so this means really using the school meals program as a market for drought-resilient crops, by looking at the menus, by shaping dietary habits, which also leads to kind of a demand for that. It looks into climate-smart agricultural practices that the school meals program can help to promote its uptake on. It also looks into thinking green when it comes to energy. So now that there is a massive scale-up happening and this enormous potential to reach scale, there's also opportunities around school infrastructure, school kitchens, green energy. So in a way, there's a wonderful opportunity right now for the RBA to support it. And Kenya is very keen, on the one hand, to learn and to really tap into lessons, experiences, expertise from Brazil, from China, but also really from its African neighbors when it comes to this new climate-smart approach. On the other hand, also, it is very willing and ready to share, continue sharing its lessons with the transition to inspire other countries to equally invest and take leadership on it. So I think it's really kind of a triple win. It's a win for the vulnerable communities that are being cushioned and strengthen their livelihoods in the markets. It's a win for the RBAs that can really show their combined strength in supporting the scale-up of these national programs as brokers for South-South. And of course, a win for the government of Kenya to protect its future human capital, which is so much at the heart of its further growth as a lower middle income country. And for kids like Camilla, of course, it keeps them in school, and who knows, maybe it'll become the next leader when it comes to advocacy on the future and also on the climate issues. So with that one, thank you very much for the opportunity, and we look very much forward to further collaborating.
Thank you, Ms. Kengot. And we can only hope that now Rwanda is next in a line to receive so many exchanges and countries visiting and learning from its own contextual experience. We are beyond the time, so I will have to close this panel. Thank you very much for your attention. As David mentioned, we are very happy. I'm sure that all panelists would be very happy to discuss bilaterally should you have any questions for them. Thank you very much, and have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you so much to our amazing moderator as well as our panelists. Another round of applause as they exit the stage. That was indeed a very insightful panel discussion. As we all know, food insecurity has continued to erode milestones that have been achieved within the developing world. And climate change, the COVID-19 pandemic, ongoing conflicts, all these have been touched upon, how they continue to escalate the situation further. We're now going to continue with the conversation. I'm now going to invite our next panel discussion. They will be having the conversation on institutional capacity building for South-South and a triangular cooperation. Once again, with a warm round of applause and a lot of enthusiasm, welcome our panelists as they walk to the stage one by one. I'll start with Mr. Ye and Ping. He is the director of SSTC Division, FAO. We also have Mr. Filano Mthembu, Executive Director, Institute for Global Dialogue. A round of applause as he comes to the stage as well. We have Ms. Sarah Mbago Bunu. A round of applause as she comes forward as well. Ms. Sarah is the Regional Director, East and South Africa at IFAD. And our moderator for this discussion is Mr. Austin Chulu, UNDP Rwanda. A round of applause as well. Mr. Austin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to go off script a little bit because scripts can be boring. So let's just have a nice, candid conversation here. My brother Ozonia, RC, said development is not instant coffee. It takes time. Now I'll give you a story. Being a nice, young, decent young man from Zambia, I joined the United Nations a long time ago. And the first thing I did was to buy my parents a piece of land to grow their own food, support my other siblings, etc. That was in 1993. As we're talking today, the same piece of land is in existence, the same people around. My parents have died, but my brother took over that. And guess what? Every time I go to visit, the first complaint they have is, we have no tomatoes. Can you go to the market and buy us tomatoes? They have land. I gave them inputs. I gave them everything they ever needed. And I had a monthly stipend to send to the family as a good family member. And I was told, every time I go, there's the same problem. What's wrong? Secondly, as I was doing my business in the African Union and the UN, I came across a meeting. We were talking about illicit financial flows out of Africa. And we had developed a project to try to stem illicit financial flows out of the continent. And that project was worth, would cost something like $21 million. So we had all the African representatives in that meeting, and we had one very nice gentleman, a deputy minister from Norway. And he, with ourselves, said, okay, Africa is losing between 50 and 150 billion US dollars in illicit financial flows. And we have this $21 million project, and we want to accurately estimate how much is going out. Our African leaders said, yes, we would want to ask our gentleman from Norway to support this 21 million. We have 50 billion going out, and we ask, the triangular cooperation actually, to support the stemming of those illicit financial flows. So, can I ask what was wrong there? Can't we, as Africans, I'm just talking about myself here, look at ourselves and find solutions for ourselves? Should we go out and ask for support, even for the smallest item? We ask our colleagues from the north. Lastly, I worked in the African Union, and within the African Union, the biggest foreign office is the European Union. Every meeting that the African Union stages is actually funded by the EU. So, my panel here has already been introduced, so I'll ask you to please give us 3 minutes to 4 minutes of what you believe is the problem and how we can tackle this challenge before we come into the audience. Thank you.
Have you invited me? Oh, okay. No, thank you. I think, first of all, I really want to appreciate Ambassador Christine and all the previous speakers, the RBAs, for organizing this. I had the opportunity, my fellow directors have invited me along, being the key custodian of the IFAD programs in East and Southern Africa. And I've been listening all morning, and it has really been inspiring. I picked up a few things. But I think I'd like to go back to what was said earlier by the professor, the minister, when he said implementation we're not short of ideas. And as the resident coordinator was speaking and talking about history and evolution and so on, it just struck me how much capacity there is across the continent. In relatively short period of time, 60 years, so many African institutions have been born and created. Including the Rwanda Corporation Agency, which is now 15 years old. And 5 years old, actually, sorry. 5 years old. And the ability to do that, we have the youngest state, South Sudan, and I had the privilege to go there. It's only 12 years old. And yet, we try to benchmark against quite stringent parameters, I would say. What is our baseline? If we are trying to compare ourselves to institutions that are 200, 300 years old, can we have a metric that is a little bit more realistic, a little bit more robust? And how do we aim to look at ourselves? I think that's my starting point. We know African food systems suffer because the African farmer has to do all the logistics him or herself. This is why your family members are not able to actually farm on that piece of land. They do not have water, they depending on rain-fed agriculture. They do not have access to agri-inputs because the agro-dealers and the agro-dealer network is not readily available. They do not have access to finance because they do not have that title deed that they are supposed to have. They also do not have access to the technical assistance from the technical assistance providers. They are missing a whole menu of public services that they should actually have to enable them to be able to make productive use of that land. So it is a piece of land, it sits there, unexploited. And I think that is the challenge that we have. How do we develop those institutional capacities that are needed and actually get them into the hands of those small-scale farmers? I think that is the issue, and this is what SSTC should do. SSTC should actually look at the market opportunities that exist in the continent. We have a $1 trillion food market. 1 trillion if you add the imports that are coming in. So how do we harness the capabilities of the private sector, the public sector, all stakeholders to actually unlock those opportunities? We've been working as IFAD with the AU to help determine and define, together with many ministries of agriculture, the guidelines for value chains in the advent of the African free trade area. And I'm just about to go to Addis to try to promulgate those and to try and see if those guidelines will actually be pro-small-scale farmer, pro-African SMEs. And we've worked on it about a year, just to anticipate and to give guidelines to government to be sure that smallholder farmers are not excluded and value chain actors, key SMEs, from African value chains. We hope that this will influence the policy directives that are needed in order to re-govern the markets that we have. So this is very key. The second thing I took away was the whole issue around financing, and of course, IFAD is a very key player in that, and the challenges of building capital markets. We never talk about capital markets across here. Capital markets are also built on pension funds. They're also built on remittances. So many countries now are developing remittances agencies. Remittances globally, by the way, are much larger than ODA financial flows. And we do know that many remitters, many dynamic Africans who are spread out right across the globe are sending resources back home, also for school feeding, also for school fees, all sorts of things the diaspora is investing at home. Why can't we think about unlocking that? So I think those capabilities and capacities are there. We just do not develop financial vehicles and vessels which will be able to tap into that and give confidence, for instance, to the diasporans and our local capital markets to unlock the capital that already exists in and around our system. The banks, commercial banks in Africa are sitting on millions, and they cannot find bankable projects. So how do we build in systems that are going to be able to develop a pipeline of bankable projects that will attract the investment that's needed? This is what we're looking at. And I think the final thing I was struck with was also the question about intellectual property rights. That's something that we should be targeting. I mean, I take that away to say, how developed are those systems right across the countries that we're working? There's different levels of development. In South Africa, of course, they're very advanced. And this actually allows people to unlock wealth and to create the millionaires that we're starting to see across the continent, if you know exactly your idea is going to be given room. And to just give confidence to the people in this room, WFP, IFAD, FAO, we do really work with innovators. We are working together to establish accelerators for innovation, where we actually accompany entrepreneurs, idea makers, to actually have a proof of concept, test their markets, develop their ideas, patent that, and help them launch. So that is really, maybe it's not presented in the SSTC context, but we are actually presenting those vehicles and those sorts of platforms to enable those African entrepreneurs to come on board. So I think those things are very important. One last point, and I'll end here. I did hear the question about biodiversity, soil health, and so on. I think it's really important. I want to just reassure the speaker around that when we did speak to the highest levels of leadership in the Kenyan administration, the next investment for IFAD is actually one that is looking at restoring, protecting, and reinforcing water towers. And we have been invited together with other partners like the Nature Conservancy to look at the Eldoret Water Tower, the Mombasa Water Tower, the Apatana Water Tower, and it's all about ecosystems. And valorizing those ecosystems. We know small-scale farmers provide essential ecosystem services that we don't remunerate them for. So those tiles of incentives and that type of designs, looking at landscapes, looking at foodscapes, is the new generation of operations that we are investing in going forward, because we recognize the need for that. So I just want to reassure this House that we are learning from others. The water tower, the water funds have come from Latin America. We've picked that from there, but they're now spread right across Africa. The uptake has been very key, because we know without water, there is no food. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you've raised a lot of important points that need to be further dissected. And I would like to invite Dr. Mtembu, who is a foreign policy expert, to actually tell us a little bit about what we can do immediately to galvanize action on all these issues that you've raised, because this is a long overdue problem that we're facing today in Africa. And how do you see institutions coming in to galvanize action around issues of food systems, and how we can graduate out of feeding our children in schools to actually producing our own or earning our own food to support children in schools? Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for the invite. I think the first thing coming from your opening remarks is to shift the mindset of, the idea that Africa is poor. Yes, we know that we have, populations that are poor, but we understand also why. I think there's enough knowledge that is out there to understand that. You've put it quite perfectly. I mean, the example you mentioned on illicit financial flows. I mean, Africa is a net exporter of capital. We finance the developed world. So this is the reality. It's not a theory or anything. Africa is financing those who are developed. We continue to finance them at times with, higher interest rates and so on and so forth. So that is something that can be addressed. I mean, we're in a center for governance here. So one thing that certainly cannot be replaced is the importance of political will. You know, we could have all the great theories out there, the blueprints, but without the political will, nothing is going to move, you know? And this is important. So we know, yes, the resources are there, because we know that with those illicit financial flows, there are more, it's actually more than not only development cooperation, but it's more than development cooperation and foreign direct investment combined that's coming into the continent. So there are resources. We just think about institutions like your African Union, you think about institutions like your regional economic communities. With all the resources there, I don't think there is an excuse for why we should not be financing those institutions more through the domestic mobilization of resources. It doesn't mean that the resources that are being funneled to those institutions by the EU, by the US, and all of that become redundant. But it means that those resources can be put, in trade, in investment, in sectors that, rarely have been discussed here today, that are priorities for driving the continent's development. So we know that the resources are there. We know that the human capital is there, because we understand the movement of people, the movement of skilled individuals. You go to all major international institutions, you will find very skilled Africans in those institutions with technical ability and know-how. So we know that all those ingredients are there, right? But when it comes to now South-South and triangular cooperation, I think we have an opportunity then as a continent to be more in the driver's seat in actually driving the discourse around South-South and triangular cooperation. At the moment, despite the fact that we are the largest number of countries within the UN General Assembly, we are the largest number of countries in the global south. However, when it comes to the production of and the capturing, it's not that these things are not happening, but when it comes to the capturing of best practices from the continent, for too long we've been a sort of recipient of knowledge on South-South cooperation that is coming from outside, from other regions, including other regions of the global south, right? So, not only institutions in the global north, but also institutions in the global south. And I think there's a big vacuum there, but it's a vacuum that can be filled. The fact that you're having this initiative, again, for me, highlights the opportunity of bringing together more African countries that have institutions that may not be exactly the same as Rwanda cooperation, but institutions that are involved in South-South and triangular cooperation. In some countries, they fall within foreign ministries as departments. In other countries, they have standalone institutions. In other countries, they have dedicated funds. So I think we need to do more to coordinate the actual South-South and triangular cooperation that is happening on the continent, so that we're in a position to drive the discourse a little bit more when it comes to South-South and triangular cooperation. And then I think we also then need to look at not only the national layer of government. There's a lot of opportunities for South-South and triangular cooperation at subnational levels. I mean, you think about a city like Kigali, you think about the fact that this continent is the region which is basically going to experience the fastest rate of urbanization. We know that all the, when you think about the major cities that are going to be built in the next 50 years, many of them are going to be on this continent, So you think about, for instance, some of the planning and some of the best practices we see in a city like Kigali. That creates opportunities for triangular cooperation with other cities. But it also creates opportunities for actors from the global north to say, how do we work with you to facilitate South-South and triangular cooperation? Creates opportunities also for UN organizations, you know, and so I think the ecosystem is there. We just have to map it and then create such platforms so that, you know, as Rwanda Cooperation continues, for instance, to convene these various multiple stakeholders, in future we also have more such gatherings, but that are actually convening African providers and African practitioners of South-South and triangular cooperation. And those meetings should be accompanied by strong research community so that they could be properly documented, but so that knowledge production can also stem from some of those meetings. And through that, we gradually strengthen, I think, the continent's voice in South-South and triangular cooperation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mtembu. Now, FAO has a lot of experience in South-South cooperation, and you've developed a lot of solutions in addressing some of the challenges that we face, especially here in Africa. What is FAO doing to accelerate and augment this area of South-South cooperation? What is it that we can bring to the continent in terms of the knowledge, and how do we go about exchanging this knowledge across the continent, knowing and understanding very well that there's a cost associated with South-South cooperation, and sometimes the cost far outpaces the actual benefit that we get from South-South cooperation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, moderator. As we know that South-South and triangular cooperation, this is a cooperative mechanism. Just now the speaker mentioned that Africa country, the largest number of countries in the southern. And also South-South cooperation main player should be the country, not for the international agency and the UN. So what about the UN agency do that? UN agency is provide a platform to matchmaking, let donor, beneficial country, private sector, and academies and others, they just sit together to have a discuss how could we can cooperate together. For FAO, FAO is one of the UN agency start South-South cooperation earlier. In fact, FAO has initiated the South-South cooperation program 40 years ago. I remember it said quite clear that during that time I worked in Chinese Ministry of Agriculture, responsible for collaboration with FAO. So I remember quite clear that under FAO Food Security Program, FAO launched the first South-South cooperation project in China in Sichuan province. Yeah. Since then, FAO has launched about several hundred projects. We mobilize $500 million resource, support the Global South. And several millions of the farmers and counterparts benefited from the projects. As just now you mentioned that South-South and the triangular cooperation also facing a lot of challenge because of pandemic, because of economic turndown, of by conflict and natural disaster and some others, because of climate change, because of biodiversity. So we made a lot of challenge. But of course, because of we have a lot of challenge, so we have a lot of opportunities. Yeah. Just now you mentioned that Africa is one of the continent has largest number of the least developed country. Because of this, so Africa continent, you have more potential of possibility in the area of, through South-South and triangular cooperation, comparing with other continents. Very honestly speaking that FAO, we allocated at least 30 to 35% of our resource to Africa continent. At least 35 to 40% of projects located in Africa continent. So now we have more than 10 projects under implementation. And about 5 to 7 projects now is already signed the agreement. And also, FAO, we initiated the resource mobilization in Africa continent. We have got a very good experience. I can just give you one example. Just last June, FAO had a very good consultation with Uganda government. So we innovated a new resource mobilization way. We mobilized resources from FAO China Trust Fund, $3 billion. And Uganda government donated $10 million from the government. So these projects together is $13 million. So please believe that donor is not only limited to developed area. All of our country, beneficial country, they are donor. If you, that means UN agency and international financial institution, if you do good consultation with beneficial country, they can do the contribution. And just this year, the June of this year, Sierra Leone government also donated $5 million, set up UTF, that means Unilateral Trust Fund. So FAO worked together with World Bank, mobilized another $2.7 million to have a new project to support Sierra Leone rice value chain. So this is, so South-South and triangular cooperation need to have new idea, new innovation, and new thinking. So just back to your the subject, the capacity building. So resource mobilization capacity building to FAO system staff, especially for FAO representative in the country office. Because this post is very, very important because FAO representative in the country office, they know these countries, the beneficial country, all of the situation.
Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate. But due to time, yeah, we'll have to move things along.
Okay, thank you very much. But I think it would be unfair to the audience if we don't open up for a few interventions before the actual closing of this very important event. So I'll open up to 3 questions from the audience. Yes. And please introduce yourself and please direct.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the invite for the UN Day for South-South Cooperation. I'm Wang, the Chinese ambassador to Rwanda. It's my pleasure to be here to have the discussions and excellent speeches. Yes, China was mentioned several times in this event. I'm very pleased to share some experience of China. First, we have experience of poverty reduction and the development of the agriculture, the industrialization, and we are very glad to share this experience with other countries and friends. I would like to emphasize. The last 40 years are paid more attention to the poverty reduction, but actually it should be a longer struggle for the country to reduce the poverty. It should be at least more than 70 years from the founding of the People's Republic of China. So from that point, we have worked hard to promote the development. You know, at that time, a lot of countries' average GDP per capita is much higher than China, but there are much efforts to be put into this struggle. Second, for the South-South cooperation and other corporations, China have put forward a lot of initiatives. I would like to name a few. For example, the Belt and Road Initiative. We have put forward this 10 years ago, and next year we would like to have, in this October, we would hold the third summit to take stock of the implementation of this initiative. We would like to exchange our views on this. And the second is about the Global Development Initiative. Last June, we have put forward 32 measures to implement. For the cooperation between China and African countries, we have the platform of FOCAC. We have developed 10 plans, 8 actions, 9 programs to implement other cooperation measures. And next year, we will hold the FOCAC meeting in China. And at last, during the last August, at the dialogue between China and Africa leaders, Chinese President Xi Jinping proposed 3 plans for the competition between China and African countries. This is quite related to the cooperation between the South-South cooperation, including the plans for agricultural development, the industrialization, and the talent development. So all these are addressing the challenges we are facing. So it's very good for me to have this opportunity to listen to the discussions and a lot of suggestions and initiatives. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon again. This is Dominic from Biogas again. I'd just like to comment on, all of the initiatives are fantastic, what's been happening with South-South. I want to comment specifically on the other panel, which was about the feeding program. What they're doing is tremendous. And yes, children do need nutrition. You can't concentrate in school. You can't absorb. In fact, in Kenya, when you go to a school and the children are quiet at break time, you know they haven't eaten. So when they're noisy and playing, you know that there's a feeding program there. Yeah. So, but there's one thing that hasn't been brought up here, is how do you cook that food? You know, growing the food and getting the food to the schools is fantastic, and getting the women farmers into the schools is brilliant. In Kenya, what the program was that the children had to come to school with a piece of wood. And they started with their desks, then they went to the fences, then they went to their neighbors' fences. It got to the point where the women were complaining because the children were going 2 kilometers away from school to get a piece of wood to bring back to school to cook. And so for that, many, many programs have failed. So we have got a technology in biogas where we use any biodegradable material, including organic material, including water hyacinth, invasive species, dungs, of course, but the very, very high calorific food value items actually produce huge amounts of gas. So what we would like to collaborate with the SSC is how do we get this solution into the schools. From there, we get the biofertilizer from the systems that will go back to the farms. So you complete the loop. So, you know, you can have a self-sustaining energy generation and food generation process. So I'd just like everyone to even... Okay, thank you.
And the last intervention before we come back to the panel.
Thank you very much, moderator. My name is George Msalia. I work with the Dairy Board of Tanzania, and my boss, the Permanent Secretary for Livestock and Fisheries, is here. I just wanted to make a comment, and mine was on the previous panel, the second one, with regard to school feeding. I want to thank my Permanent Secretary again, because when he was the Permanent Secretary in the President's Office, Local Government Authority and Regional Administration, he was the owner of the program for school feeding throughout the country. I just wanted to remind each one of us here that we have advocated a lot with regard to school meals, but we forget the important animal protein, which we really advocate, some of us, because we work in the Ministry of Livestock and Fisheries. So this is a very important component of the school milk, and I would like to all of us to continue while with the school milk, school feeding. We also consider the importance of animal protein, because it's one of the most important nutrients for young kids. So in Tanzania, we thank again the Permanent Secretary who this year signed the so-called school milk program action plan, which we are implementing. And for this, I'm calling for cooperation from all the agencies and the well-wishers so that we can implement this important program in Tanzania. We are open up for cooperation. So thank you very much. This is what I wanted to make, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. I think Tanzania was very active in this meeting, and really appreciate that. Is the spirit of South-South cooperation. Now I'll give my panel a minute each, please, to just give us the key takeaways, but also what we want to go away from this meeting with. I'll start with you, Madam Sarah.
Thank you very much, moderator. We have Amma, we have the IFAD team here. SSTC is very much on our agenda. I think the takeaway here is how we can look at different models of SSTC. We have learned a lot about the Rwanda Cooperation Agency model. I think there's opportunities to partner more directly with the private sector. We can also partner more and create centers of excellence with academia. We are doing it from the SSTC Center in Addis for IFAD. And also foster more linkages, intergovernment linkages, but also with digital providers. Why not? We have all those experiences. We have a rural portal, a solutions portal at IFAD. It's available for everyone. I want this agenda to continue, and we appeal to those who are our great partners to increase their contribution for this. It's a really important agenda, and we're only halfway there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, colleagues. I think the last two inputs for me, that what emphasizes is this, a systematic approach, you know, thinking about, not thinking in terms of a short-term project, you know, just thinking more programmatically, thinking about sustainability, you know, and factoring that into the initial planning, you know, not stumbling across it. When, you know, the first year is done or the first few years are done, and then you suddenly stumble upon it. So for me, that's what that emphasizes on. I think the Chinese ambassador also, it's very important, I think, the intervention he made, because you remind us that we mustn't just look at the last, you know, 40 years or so. We need to understand that the last 40 years are also as a result of some of the measures that were put in place before that. But it's also about the culture of governance that is fostered. But also, I think, the example the ambassador mentions, I mean, China has eradicated, so we've got a goal by 2030 to eradicate, you know, extreme poverty. China achieved that, I think, last year. And it's not just playing with numbers. I think the way that they measure poverty is even stricter than, you know, some of the other measurements. And for me, what that highlights is that the examples of development in moving into the future are not necessarily going to come from the global north. The global north is going to remain a very important actor and an important player. But the reality is that there's certain examples that are not transferable to other countries in the developing world, simply because of the conditions that developed countries, achieve their own development objectives. So for me, it's going to be important that we're going to have to look at what China has done. We're going to have to look at what Rwanda has done in the last, 30 years. But there's a whole range of other countries also in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, that we're going to be looking at. And what's interesting there is that even countries in the global north are looking at examples in the global south to determine how they are going to be or where they are going to be in the future. So I think this is quite important, that we're no longer in this era of north-south. We are also in the era of south-north. The north can also learn very valuable lessons from what's happening in the global south.
Mr. Amping, you have the last word.
Thank you very much. At the first, I just want to respond. Chinese ambassador just mentioned that. I fully agree what you mentioned, that sustainable agriculture development, food security, and poverty reduction need long-time efforts, need to formulate a long-term strategy, need to several generations to solve it. For summarize this panel discussion, I just repeat FAO Director General's words. I think that is very good. Our Director General mentioned that several times through conference, through council meeting, Twitter, and Facebook. He mentioned that South-South and Triangular Cooperation is a great mechanism to help achieve agri-food system transformation and SDG. FAO is committed to mainstream SSTC in our work to achieve the four better. Them including better production, better nutrition, better environment, better life, no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with those final words, let me hand over to our facilitator.
Thank you so much. Another round of applause to... Our moderator, as well as the panelists, really did a good job at unpacking the institutional capacity building for South-South and Triangular Cooperation, looking at what is in place, what are the gaps, what really needs to be done. We're now going to transition towards the end of this morning sessions. We're going to have closing remarks. Thank you. It has been a very fruitful morning, a lot to think about, and I really do hope that even as we conclude, these conversations will continue happening even as we have lunch right after this. And I'd like to just start by welcoming Mr. Ye Anping to kindly come back to the podium. Another round of applause as he comes. Yeah, he's going to deliver some of his remarks as we close.
Thank you. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me on behalf of RDA, FAO, IFAD, and WP to express our sincere appreciation for organizer, Rwanda side, for your contribution. That is an excellent contribution. And also I would like, on behalf of RBA, to thank our colleague from FAO, IFAD, and WP for their organization. I would like to to thank, because this activity we decided at the meeting of direct meeting RBA on May of this year. During that time, we discussed that since the year of 2020, we always through Zoom to celebrate the UN Day on South-South and Triangular Cooperation. So we celebrated, but we didn't get very deep memory. But if we can visit the countryside, the country, to dialogue directly with the beneficial country, donors, and the others, I think that this can strengthen our cooperation. Through the consultation, we can find the more ways for the solution. Our joint program aims to strengthen national school feeding program through South-South and Triangular Cooperation is a key testament of the importance of mutual benefit for South-South and Triangular Cooperation Initiative. In line with FAO Director General Dr. Qudong-Yu's motto of working together, learning together, and contributing together for the benefit for our member country, I'm glad to see how this joint commitment has resulted in further mainstream in South-South and Triangular Cooperation. Our joint action are therefore fundamental to accelerate the recovery and transformation of agri-food system in Global South. We have heard today from our discussions and opening remarks, our distinguished panelists, how this initiative will strengthen the national capacity to establish sustainable and inclusive public food procurement, promote local food value chain, improve access direct beneficial to healthy food, to ultimate support of the resource mobilization, and to the transform agriculture products into school meal. We therefore need to continue work together and take swift action to enhance our collaboration engagement in the Global South. We strongly believe that South-South and Triangular Cooperation is a key mechanism to enable member countries to mobilize resources and adopt this solution to their needs, that is the Global South. The interactions and exchange today, RBS, have also highlighted the need to, first, strengthen our partnership and engagement with stakeholders, including the private sector, civil society, and research institutes. Second, to generate new innovation solutions and to strategically seek additional resources in order to enhance the effectiveness of South-South and Triangular Cooperation in addressing global development challenges. These challenges have exposed the fragility of global food security and agri-food system. We, RBS, including FAO, IFAD, and WP, therefore need to resource innovative ideas in collaboration with global stakeholders to ensure sustainable agri-food system and food safety for all. To this end, RBA is working closely with its counterpart through South-South and Triangular Cooperation Innovation Center, Excellency Center, Reference Center, and networks. China is one of the main partners to RBS, all of included FAO, IFAD, and WP. We implemented numerous projects supported by China, are also promoting cost effectiveness, adaptable and scalable solutions, and technical to help resolve present agriculture development challenges. drawing on China's extensive knowledge and expertise on sustainable agriculture and food system transformation. To FAO, we are also working very closely with some counterparts, such as CELAC, Netherlands, Germany, Republic of Korea, Japan, Ireland, Nigeria, Uganda, Sierra Leone, Vietnam. All of them, they are contributors, both funding resource and technical and technology. Let me conclude by saying how important it is that we further scale up our joint efforts to South-South and triangular cooperation. Efficient collaboration among FAO, IFAD, and WP is therefore crucial for achieving sustainable agri-food system transformation through South-South and triangular cooperation. Finally, I would like to extend my heartfelt appreciation to the organizing committee, the volunteer, and all others who have worked. Thanks to you again. Your dedication has not gone unnoticed. Finally, thank you, the organizer of Rwanda, again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yi, for your remarks. We're now going to hear from our host. Help me welcome to the stage Ambassador Christine Ngurichinga, the CEO of Rwanda Corporation.
So, wow, what an amazing morning of insight, exchanges and knowledge, or exchange of knowledge in all the spirit of South-South and triangular cooperation. So I hope you are also encouraged by discussions and show of solidarity by our distinguished partners, as I am. Are you? Yeah. So I will not venture now in trying to summarize the discussion we've been having this morning, but I'm sure you all have your take-homes and takeaways, and most importantly also enough food for thought. But I want to thank some of our distinguished participants here. I want to start by thanking our guest of honor. He has to leave earlier. As you know, ministers are very busy. So Honorable Minister Professor Nchuti Manasseh, Minister of State in charge of Eastern African Community in WC for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, for gracing us with his presence and his impactful words. That encourages us all to continue to work, but most importantly, to implement what we are saying as we are collaborating and striving to achieve the SDGs. Mr. Ozodia Oyeto, the UN Resident Coordinator, and my dear brother, he has been a strong supporter to our work here at Rwanda Corporation. It's always a pleasure to have you here among us, and you always feel at home. I thank you once again for participating in the UN Day for South-South Cooperation with us, and for sharing your knowledge that motivates us to work harder, smarter, and bolder to promote cooperation. And thank you also for your insightful historical touch you added to the discussion. I would also like to thank Engineer Pascal Gatabazi, the technical advisor at the Ministry of Education. He mentioned that the minister himself couldn't be here today, but we are thankful that you represented the Honorable Minister of Education to you and for your valuable contribution to the panel on school feeding. And we look forward to follow what is happening in that area, particularly here in Rwanda, and at Rwanda Corporation also to see where we can also facilitate the exchange of experiences and knowledge with other countries. This year, we celebrated the UN Day for South-South Cooperation with the Rome-based agencies, as you have already noticed, FAO, IFAD, and WFP. Allow me to express our gratitude to Mr. David Catrud, Director of the Program and Humanitarian Division at WFP, Mr. Ye Anping, Director of South-South Cooperation Division at FAO, Mr. Ronald Hartman, Director for Global Engagement, Partnerships and Resource Mobilization at IFAD, for traveling all the way to Kigali to be with us today. It's the first time I understood that they are celebrating the South-South Cooperation Day outside Rome. So we are really proud that we made it to bring you to Kigali for this celebration. And thank you very much for the collaboration also with your team. I see Amma, I see other colleagues who are working tirelessly with our teams to make this event possible. It has truly been a pleasure to engage with you and understand more about the work you are doing within the framework of South-South and triangular cooperation. And I look forward to build on this partnership to really enhance the impacts of South-South and triangular cooperation. And as we said, really to implement and to work the talk. I also want to thank the Diplomatic Corps for the show of strength in not only supporting this event with your presence, but also for your valuable contribution. Especially thank you, Honorable Excellency Ambassador of China, for also your contribution to the last panel. But I also look forward to continue working with the diplomatic missions, with your bosses, my brother, as you said, as we continue to champion promoting cooperation between Rwanda and your respective nations. We at Rwanda Cooperation are committed to work with your governments to promote partnerships and implement a continuous learning approach, tailoring international good practices to your own needs and context. SSTC is essential to us. Lastly, we have witnessed the power of convening. We look forward to inviting you to our upcoming conference that will bring more governments, partners, and agencies together to our first annual convention on South-South and triangular cooperation. So we have more in store for you, and we look forward to see you again in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for the closing remarks. We're now going to head out for lunch, and as the Ambassador said once again, thank you all for your cooperation, thank you for your contribution, and for your kind attention. As lunch will be served on the 6th floor, but as we all walk out, I would kindly like to ask all our speakers for today, if you could kindly stay behind. We're going to take a group picture to just mark this moment. Thank you all once again. Have a good afternoon. If we could have our speakers kindly come to the stage.